Chapter 459. That's true. Delta Orgi nodded slightly. Lung Shiqi removed his warbeast armor and looked around. When he came to this area, he quickly noticed that the spiritual energy in his body was constantly overflowing. This should be the restriction of the wood area. However, compared to the abnormal gravity of the earth area, this place was really much better. After all, which person who could enter the second round didn't have a large number of pills on them? As long as the pills weren't exhausted, the loss of spiritual energy was completely within an acceptable range. But Lung Shiqi thought about it again. If this was the only restriction, then the difference between this place and the earth area was too big. So he asked Delta Orgi, apart from this green-robed man, did you encounter any other dangers? Delta Orgi shook her head and said, no, I bumped into him not long after I arrived. We fought without saying anything, and then you suddenly appeared. Lung Shiqi's appearance was also bizarre, but Delta Orgi didn't ask too much, because she knew that Lung Shiqi had too many secrets and was full of all kinds of inconceivable things. So no matter what shocking actions Lung Shiqi did, she would feel that it was normal. The reason why this place is called the Minor Five Elements Chaos Paradise is that it is divided into 5 different areas according to the 5 elements. In the middle of them, there is a very mysterious place. Let's call it the Chaos area. When I entered this paradise, I appeared in the Earth area. That place is full of terrifying gravity. Even if I use all my strength, I can barely move. It can be said that it is very dangerous. And this place doesn't seem to be too dangerous, but it is a bit unreasonable. Lung Shiqi said what he knew, what he experienced, and what he guessed. Delta Orgi fell into deep thought. According to Lung Shiqi, this place was indeed a bit too peaceful. Let's not think about this for now. Buyangqiu is also in the wood area. Let's meet up with him first. The more people there are, the easier it will be to deal with the danger. Before Lung Shiqi prepared to teleport, he also memorized the area where everyone was and their approximate location. There were only 5 or 6 people in each area, and they all encountered various threats. For example, the temperature in the fire region was extremely high, and there were monsters similar to flame spirits inside. The water region was a world of ice and snow, and many snow giants were chasing after the spirit cultivator. The air of the metal region was filled with needle-like, formless radiance. There were also groups of golden-armored guards in formation. As for the chaotic region, even the system map would not be able to detect it. While the 2 of them swallowed the pills, they carefully rushed towards Buyangqiu's direction. Along the way, it was very peaceful and they didn't encounter any monsters. However, when they arrived, they didn't see Buyangqiu. There wasn't even anyone in Byakugan's field of vision. Lung Shiqi wasn't too surprised. After all, it had been quite some time since he used fate. Buyangqiu might have moved to another location. Just then, Delta Orgi made a sound of surprise. What's wrong? Lung Shiqi turned to look at Delta Orgi and found that her face was very strange. Delta Orgi first closed her eyes, as if she was sensing something. After a few breaths, she suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She anxiously said, "There's something wrong with my spirit energy. Quick, check your spiritual energy." When Lung Shiqi saw Delta Orgi's appearance, he knew that she must have discovered something big. He hurriedly looked inside and quickly found the problem. That was, his spirit energy had decreased. This wasn't a decrease after he used his spirit technique, but a permanent decrease. Logically speaking, after using a spirit technique, the spirit energy in his body would definitely be consumed. However, as long as he spent some time, the spirit energy would naturally be replenished. But now, Lung Shiqi found that the upper limit of his spirit energy had decreased. In other words, his cultivation was regressing. "I understand," Lung Shiqi said in a deep voice. "Our spirit energy is not slowly decreasing, but disappearing forever." At first, Lung Shiqi did not pay too much attention to the spirit energy in his body. Although he was a little strange that the recovery speed of his spirit energy was slower than before, he did not think too much about it. Now, it seemed that although there was no great danger in the wood region, the hidden danger was more terrifying than the earth region. Spirit energy was the foundation of a spirit cultivator. As the saying goes, the The path of spirit cultivation was like sailing against the current. Now Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi's spirit energy cultivation was gradually decreasing. This was a little difficult for the two who pursued power to accept. At the same time, they thought that they had to leave this region first. Lung Shiqi immediately opened the system map. He compared it with the distance he had traveled. The wood region should be about 100 miles in radius. There were two regions closest to them. One was the metal region, and the other was the mysterious chaos region. Soon, Lung Shiqi made a decision to go to the chaos region. This minor 5 elements chaos grotto heaven was clearly centered around the chaos region. Perhaps their final test would be in the chaos region. Of course, there might be greater danger in there, but Lung Shiqi really could not bear the feeling of his spirit energy being drained for no reason. He chose a direction and led Delta Origi straight to the chaos region. With their speed, it would only take half a day to reach the chaos region. In this dense forest, two exceptionally nimble figures constantly flitted past. But suddenly, Lung Shiqi's body paused. Delta Origi suddenly stopped and turned her head in confusion. Lung Shiqi's face was gloomy, and there was even a trace of disbelief on his face. Delta Origi rarely saw Lung Shiqi with such an expression. She subconsciously asked, "What did you notice?" Sigh. Lung Shiqi sighed deeply. This wood region is far more complicated than we thought. The reason why he sighed was because when he opened the map to see how far they were, he was shocked to find that they had actually gone astray. At this time, they should have almost reached the intersection of the two regions, but now they were actually back to the center of the wood region. When Lung Shiqi said this, Delta Origi was also shocked. This kind of thing had happened before on Blood Mist Island, but at that time, they had only just entered the spirit transformation realm, and were confused by the fog. Now the two of them were both in the spirit aperture realm. Lung Shiqi's spiritual power was enormous, and his perception was far beyond that of spirit cultivators of the same level. He also had the Byakugan and the system map in his hands. How could they have unknowingly gone astray? How was this possible? Chapter 460. Lung Shiqi quickly calmed himself down. He thought about it carefully and realized that there was actually a way to deal with this predicament. As long as he kept Byakugan and the system map open, he could still leave this place after finding the right direction. At this moment, he finally understood that the danger of the wood region did not lie in the monsters, but in the fact that they would trap you here and slowly drain your spiritual energy. If you stayed here for too long without leaving, your cultivation realm would drop again and again. At that time, even if you were lucky enough to leave, you would not have enough strength to face other dangers. It could be said that the wood region was a soft knife. Now, it seemed that when they went to find Wuxia, it was not that he had gone far, but that they had already deviated from their original direction. Then what should we do now? Delta Origi asked. Lung Shiqi calmed himself down and said, "Don't worry, I have a way. I was a bit careless before." After saying that, Lung Shiqi directly opened Byakugan, and everything within a radius of 12 miles was within his field of vision. At the same time, he kept opening the system map to correct his direction. "Let's go." The two of them started to walk again, but this time, their path was very strange in the eyes of others. They would change their direction every once in a while, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, and sometimes even to the back. But in reality, they were indeed slowly approaching the chaos region. Lung Shiqi looked at the mark on the system map, and his heart completely calmed down. At first, when he first entered the minor chaos paradise and found out that the system map could be used, he was actually a bit happy. This was equivalent to activating a full map hack. It made him feel like he had everything under control, but it was this mentality that caused him to suffer a little. If he was more cautious and careful, he should have already reached the chaos region. Now he had wasted so much time for nothing and lost a portion of his spiritual energy for nothing. This was the price he had to pay. While Lung Shiqi was running, he could not help but look at Delta Origi. Delta Origi's cultivation was only at the first level of the spirit aperture realm. If they stayed here for too long, their cultivation might drop. If his carelessness caused the Delta Origi to fall, he would not know how to face the Delta Origi. However, the Delta Origi didn't notice Lung Shiqi's gaze. because they could already see layers of gray fog in their field of vision. That was the primal chaos region. When the two of them got closer, they immediately felt an indescribable aura from the gray fog. It gave them an ominous feeling. Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi looked at each other, their eyes filled with determination. This area is the center of this mini paradise. There must be quite a bit of danger inside. We must be extra careful. As Lung Shiqi spoke, he donned his demonic beast blood rune armor and gripped his inky jade sword. He was ready to fight at any moment. Delta Origi also took a deep breath. Her ink-black hair instantly turned gray, and her entire body gave off a dangerous feeling. Immediately, the two of them walked into the gray fog together. The surrounding scenery suddenly changed, but the scene in front of Lung Shiqi was a little unexpected. He thought that the gray fog was so ominous that there must be some demons and ghosts inside. Who would have thought that what appeared in front of him at this time was a lush green valley? All kinds of flowers were in full bloom, and the breeze carried bursts of floral fragrance. It was like a paradise. Only the gray fog floating in the sky made people feel a little depressed. What was even more amazing was that the spiritual energy here was abnormally rich. Moreover, it was not the normal spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It did not seem to contain any strange attributes, but the purest spiritual energy that was close to the origin. No matter what attribute you cultivated, you could cultivate to your heart's content here. Lung Shiqi could not help but blink, afraid that he was mistaken. This place clearly looked like a paradise. He muttered, "The primal chaos region is actually like this? What do you think, Delta Origi?" However, he did not hear Delta Origi's voice. Lung Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly turned around, but there was no one beside him. Lung Shiqi gripped the inky jade sword tightly, fully activating his Byakugan and perception. However, to his surprise, his Byakugan could only detect the situation within 1 mile. As for his perception, it could barely leave his body. The primal chaos region can actually greatly suppress perception and detection. Lung Shiqi was secretly shocked. But even so, Delta Origi can't move 1 mile away in an instant. That gray fog is very strange. Lung Shiqi could not help but frown. He had just found Delta Origi, and not long after, they were separated again. Delta Origi was still injured, and her cultivation was not high. He was more or less a little worried. However, on second thought, Delta Origi was able to come out of Blood Mist Island and Blood Prison. This proved her strength and ability. Moreover, Delta Origi was the disciple of Bone Demon. She must have some trump cards in her hands. She should not be in danger for the time being. Lung Shiqi looked left and right, found a small path, and walked along it. He was vigilant at all times, and after about an hour he actually saw a small village in the distance. The village was not big, but it was still crisscross with traffic. Smoke rose in spirals, and from time to time he could hear a few children's laughter. There was a village in this place? There were still living people in this place? Lung Shiqi subconsciously felt that something was wrong. He was very careful as he approached the village. Just as he walked to the entrance of the village, he heard a burst of wind blowing from inside. Then a funeral procession came out. At the front, there was a middle-aged man with a pale face wearing mourning clothes. He held a white banner, expressionless. Behind him, 2 people walked and scattered paper money. Behind him, there were 4 people carrying a heavy coffin. There were dozens of people following behind them, all of them crying and wailing. However, there were also a few children in colorful clothes who were laughing at the back of the procession. They seemed a little out of place. Lung Shiqi's greenish-white eyes kept flashing with spiritual light. There seemed to be nothing wrong with this group of mourners. Everyone here was made of flesh and blood, and they were all living beings. In other words, these people were all real people. Lung Shiqi watched coldly as the procession walked past him. He did not expect that the last old man to notice him. The old man walked over and showed Lung Shiqi a kind smile. "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Lung Shiqi sensed again. The old man in front of him did not have any abnormalities. He was a very ordinary person. He put on a harmless smile and said, "I've traveled for a long time, and I'm tired. I'll have to trouble you then." Chapter 461. The old man brought Leng Shiqi into the village. Leng Shiqi looked around as he walked. The entire village seemed very peaceful. The villagers in the village were also more hospitable. When they saw Leng Shiqi, they would smile warmly. However, Leng Shiqi always felt strange because these people's smiles were full of hypocrisy. The old man brought Leng Shiqi to a black canopy that had been set up. Inside the canopy, there were round tables that were more than 100 feet long. Every table was filled with people who were eating and drinking heartily. The old man said, "Guest, what a coincidence. There is a wedding banquet today. Guest, if you are weak, please take a seat." Wedding banquet? Leng Shiqi glanced at the old man. This was clearly a funeral banquet. When did it become a wedding banquet? Leaving the sea of suffering and ascending to paradise. Isn't this a wedding banquet? The old man explained. Old man, you are right. Leng Shiqi nodded, but he did not take a seat. Because in his perception, these people were not eating delicious food. They were clearly eating rotten maggots. The wine they were drinking also exuded a strong smell of corpses. Leng Shiqi naturally could not eat or drink these things. At this time, the burly man next to him handed over a bowl of wine. Guest, this is the strongest wine in our village. Come and try it. Before the burly man finished speaking, he poured the bowl of wine directly into Leng Shiqi's mouth. Leng Shiqi snorted coldly, and an invisible spiritual force spread out and pushed the burly man away. However, the strange thing was that Leng Shiqi had clearly controlled this spiritual force to a very weak level, but the burly man directly scattered like a paper man. But this burly man's corpse did not bleed at all. The burly man's head that had fallen to the ground still had a smile on it. Guest, what do you mean by this? Are you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? At the same time, everyone in the black tent quieted down. Everyone turned to look at Leng Shiqi with a smile. That kind of smile made people shudder. The old man squinted and said, "We are treating the guest well, but the guest wants to kill. This is your fault." Everyone who was originally sitting came over with a bowl of wine. They still had a warm smile and said, "Guest, come and drink. Drink a bowl. Don't be shy." Like a demon's voice that lingered in Leng Shiqi's ears directly penetrated into his heart, making his state of mind unconsciously had a trace of extreme irritation. "Imph." Leng Shiqi snorted and said, trying to be mysterious. Immediately, the spiritual force around his body erupted like an invisible vortex swept out. In an instant, the entire black canopy was sent flying, and everyone around it was torn apart. What was even stranger was that this time, all of them looked just like real people. Blood splattered everywhere, broken limbs flew everywhere, and some scarlet blood even splashed onto Leng Shiqi's face. The feeling of blood was so real, it was as if he had killed hundreds of innocent lives in an instant. Leng Shiqi wiped the blood off his face in a daze. An indescribable emotion emerged in his heart. In fact, to this day, there were many people who died at the hands of Leng Shiqi, but all the people he killed were spirit cultivators, and they were all killed for the sake of survival, for the sake of benefits. He had never killed an ordinary person. He had always treated killing as a method, not a bloodthirsty person. Now the scene in front of him was like hell on earth, but it felt so real that it actually aroused the killing intent in his heart. Just as everyone in the vicinity was dead, Leng Shiqi only felt a blur in front of his eyes. He was actually standing at the entrance of the village again. There was a funeral team coming out. The leader was still the expressionless middle-aged man, and at the end of the team was still the kind-looking old man. What was going on? At this moment, Leng Shiqi did not know why he had returned here, nor did he know how to recover. He also did not know how the old man was resurrected. Although he knew that all of this should be fake and was very likely an illusion, his eyes and feelings told him that all of this was real. The old man walked towards Leng Shiqi and said, "Guest, you must have come from afar. Why don't you come into the village and rest for a while?" Everything was exactly the same as what Leng Shiqi had experienced before. Even the old man's words were exactly the same. What the hell is going on? Leng Shiqi suddenly felt extremely annoyed. He used his finger as a sword and instantly released hundreds of triple extinction sword chi that covered the entire village. The icy blue triple extinction sword chi swept everywhere, constantly strangling everyone here. In just a dozen breaths of time, the entire village had become a dead village. What Leng Shiqi did not know was that his eyes had begun to turn slightly red. However, in the next moment, the village was restored again, and a group of people rushed out of the village. Leng Shiqi's killing intent surged, and his eyes flashed with a bloody light. Suddenly, he formed the grasping flower seal, and a faint Buddhist light appeared, suppressing the killing intent in his heart. Phew! Leng Shiqi let out a heavy breath. He had just killed all the villagers in the village, and they were all ordinary people, who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Although he knew that these were not ordinary people, the feeling was extremely real. It almost made him addicted to endless killing, and become a madman who only knew how to kill. Fortunately, his willpower was strong, and he had the grasping flower seal, a Buddhist secret technique that specialized in suppressing evil thoughts, so he woke up just as he was about to become a demon. He could not help but think to himself, "This is really something." In this chaotic area, his eyes and the power of perception could no longer be trusted. Instead, they had become a channel for him to fall into a predicament. Then Leng Shiqi simply closed his Byakugan and withdrew all his perception. At this time, the old man came over again and said the same thing. This time, Leng Shiqi also smiled and said, "Okay, this junior has been traveling for a long time and is really tired. If it is convenient, this junior would like to stay here for a night." The smile on the old man's face froze for a moment. Then he brought Leng Shiqi into the black shelter. The burly man once again handed over a bowl of smelly wine. This time Leng Shiqi did not attack. Instead, he drank the bowl of wine very generously. The disgusting smell immediately filled his mouth and nose, making him feel nauseous. However, Leng Shiqi's expression did not change. Instead he praised, good wine, another bowl." The smiles on the old man and the burly man's faces stiffened for a moment, but they immediately returned to normal. The burly man directly picked up a jar of wine and shouted, "Our guest is really straightforward. Today we must drink this jar of wine. Come, let's get drunk." Leng Shiqi rolled up his sleeves and started eating and drinking with the table full of people. He smiled as he swallowed the rotten food and corpse water into his stomach. After a while, a little boy about 4 or 5 years old wearing a red tutu came bouncing over. A glint flashed across Leng Shiqi's eyes as he thought to himself, "Finally." Chapter 462. The boy hopped over to Leng Shiqi's side and stared at him with his big round eyes full of curiosity. The boy asked in a coquettish voice, "Big brother, do you know what you're eating and drinking?" Leng Shiqi looked at the food on the table and said, "Of course I know, but is this all you've got? Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? Or is it that very few people have been able to do this for a long time, so you didn't prepare any backup plans?" The boy's expression instantly turned incomparably cold, and his originally innocent eyes were also covered with a layer of frightening gray fog. The surrounding villagers also withdrew their smiles, and all of them stared coldly at Leng Shiqi. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared to death in this environment and atmosphere, but Leng Shiqi smiled coldly. "What, you want to kill me now that I've exposed you? You're trying to make me lose myself here, become a madman, and finally drive me to my death. I have to say that your methods are indeed very clever. This is a bit like an illusion, but it's also beyond illusion. No matter how strong my spiritual power is, it's useless. Instead, I'll fall deeper. So if I want to break out of this situation, if I want to kill you, what I need is not strength, but a state of mind." At this point, Leng Shiqi gently flicked his finger, and a translucent ripple spread out. Wherever the ripple went, the scene turned into nothingness, including the old man, the strong man, the tables of banquets, and the houses disappeared. In the end, there was only a strange monster half the size of a person left in front of Leng Shiqi. This thing was like an irregular cloud of smoke, floating in front of Leng Shiqi. At this moment, the monster's hollow eyes revealed boundless astonishment. "You, how can you break my illusion?" "I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you," Leng Shiqi said emotionlessly. Then he straightened his palm and slashed out the god-vanquishing void-slashing blade towards the monster's vital spirit. The monster did not seem to have a physical body. It would have been very difficult to deal with, But the god-vanquishing void slash happened to be the bane of this kind of creature. The monster was instantly cut in half and returned to chaos as it screamed. Only a fist-sized crystal was left behind. It was the soul stone. Lung Shiqi weighed the soul stone in his hand. The soul stone didn't look small, but it weighed about 3 or 4 taels. He then compared the soul stones that he had obtained from killing the stone monsters, and found that the larger soul stones seemed to be much purer. The two added together weighed about half a catty, which was equivalent to half a token. Not bad, Lung Shiqi murmured. But at this moment, Nine Leaves' voice suddenly sounded. This is the smell of souls. Upon hearing this, Lung Shiqi was shocked. Senior Nine Leaf, you've awakened? No, I haven't completed my advancement yet. Right now, it's just a wisp of my consciousness. I was attracted by the aura of souls. Lung Shiqi thought to himself, so that's how it is. But from what Nine Leaves said, this soul stone actually contains soul power. After refining this thing, it can directly increase the strength of the soul. Help me collect some. As for the reward, we'll talk about it after I fully awaken. Nine Leaf continued, but her voice sounded a little weak. Okay, but Senior Nine Leaf, how do I refine this thing? Just eat it. Lung Shiqi. Eat it? As a monster, Nine Leaf could eat it, but Lung Shiqi could eat it directly? However, when Lung Shiqi asked again, he didn't get a reply from Nine Leaf. Lung Shiqi pinched the soul stone and put it in his mouth. Suddenly, there was a burst of stench. It was really difficult to swallow. He quickly held his breath, thinking that he had eaten the most disgusting things in the illusion anyway. This was nothing. He steeled his heart, opened his mouth, and swallowed the soul stone. Soon after, he felt a strange power enter his mind. It was as if a pair of gentle hands were comforting his soul, making him feel as if he was floating. Then his spiritual power also increased a little. Lung Shiqi carefully sensed it. Just this small piece of soul stone had increased his spiritual power by as much as half a month of refining. With a joyful look on his face, he muttered, "This soul stone is really good stuff. No wonder even Nine Leaf is envious." Of course, although this thing was good, if you wanted to get a soul stone, you first had to be alive to take it. Lung Shiqi went from the earth region to the wood region, and then here. The dangers he experienced were extremely high. For example, that strange monster just now. If it wasn't for his extraordinary willpower, he would have lost himself long ago. Speaking of which, if he wanted to refine the soul stone to increase his spiritual power, and collect some for Nine Leaf, how would he pass the test? Lei Mayan had said that only the top 5 people with the most soul stones and tokens would pass the test. So now Lung Shiqi needed a large amount of soul stones, a lot of soul stones. Lung Shiqi looked left and right, then chose a direction and continued forward. At the same time, on the other side of the chaos region, there was a viscous sea of blood. In the center of the sea of blood stood an exquisite body. It was Delta Origi. At this moment, the sea of blood around Delta Origi condensed into blood-colored spears that stabbed into her body. Then the blood-colored spears disappeared, but another spear appeared from another angle. Now Delta Origi's body had dozens of bloody holes. Blood flowed out of her body, but her expression was abnormally tenacious and cold. Her eyes were as bright as gems, and revealed a cold expression. "Is this all you've got? Is this all you've got?" "Not enough. Far from enough. The pain I've endured is far beyond your imagination." Delta Origi roared like a madwoman. She used her fingers as a sword, and a translucent blood sword condensed in the void. The blood sword slashed down, and actually tore through the sea of blood, hooking out a monster that looked like an octopus. The sword flashed, and the monster was instantly beheaded. A lump of soft flesh spread out on the ground, still wriggling. The sea of blood around them disappeared, and even the wounds and blood on Delta Origi's body disappeared. If Lung Shiqi was here, he would definitely recognize it. It was this method again. It was similar to an illusion, but on a higher level. If Delta Origi broke the trap, her wounds would be fake. But if she didn't break the trap, those wounds would be real. In a dark wasteland, a group of monsters with only one mouth were devouring a body. In the end, only a skeleton was left. However, the skeleton still flickered with a faint yellow light. "Eat, eat. If you don't eat now, You won't have the chance. After that, the skeleton actually grew flesh and bones, instantly transforming into a thin middle-aged man. He was Wu Diao. Wu Diao waved his hands, and without any spiritual light, the ground suddenly shook. The ground surged like waves, and in just a few breaths, the man-eating monsters were buried here forever. In a magnificent palace, more than a dozen young girls were dancing. There were also a few girls sitting around a handsome young man, whispering into each other's ears. The young man's eyes were not moved at all. On the contrary, they were filled with disdain and killing intent. You dare to provoke this young master with this kind of trash? Scram. Then, the young man stretched out his 5 fingers, and starlight appeared on his palm. Endless starlight shone throughout the palace, and the girls were all turned into ashes. This young man was Zhuge. Chapter 463. Not long after, Lung Shiqi came to a murky pond. There was an old man in a raincoat fishing there. With a splash, the old man picked up his fishing rod and caught a bloody severed arm. Seeing this, Lung Shiqi raised his eyebrows. It seemed that he had found the right person. The old man in the raincoat held the severed arm and said to Lung Shiqi, "Young man, this old man just caught a fish. It's still fresh. Do you want to try it?" "This again? I'm a little tired of it." Lung Shiqi shook his head. He had encountered similar situations several times before coming here. Of course, he also had a few more soul stones in his mustard seed bracelet. The old man in the raincoat swung his hand, and the severed arm flew over with the fishing rod. Halfway through, the fishing rod suddenly turned into a spear. The destructive spear intent seemed to be able to destroy everything. The spear appeared too suddenly and too strangely. Even when it was in front of Lung Shiqi, he did not have time to react. Lung Shiqi was instantly killed by the destructive spear intent. The old man in the raincoat smiled coldly and said, "Today I caught a big fish again. Not bad really." But in the next moment his smile froze on his face. This was because Lung Shiqi's body did not spurt out blood. Instead it dissipated like smoke. This is an illusion? When? The old man in the raincoat was shocked. From the beginning to the end, he did not see any clues, nor did he feel any spiritual fluctuations. When did the old man use an illusion to blind his eyes? TSK, I was wrong this time. In the past, I've only seen ghosts pretending to be people. Now I'm seeing a person pretending to be a ghost. Lung Shiqi's figure suddenly appeared behind the old man in the raincoat. His inky jade sword was dyed with a layer of blood. In an instant, blood rushed to the sky. Streaks of sword light formed a sword net and fell down. The old man in the woven rush raincoat swung his long spear horizontally, and pure spirit energy gushed out violently. There seemed to be the roars of hundreds of beasts within the spirit energy, which dispersed the sword light one after another. Lung Shiqi suddenly sheathed his sword, and his palm lit up with a dark golden brilliance. The ultimate yang hidden palm suddenly appeared. Yin and yang reversed, and all the spiritual energy was swept away. The old man's expression changed abruptly. He was powerless to resist this ultimate yang nether opening palm that contained both yang and underworld chill energy. The only thing he could do now was flee. The aura around his body changed, and the straw raincoat on his body instantly flew away, revealing his true appearance and strong body. How was he an old man? He was clearly a young man in his 30s. Lung Shiqi thought for a moment. This person seemed to be in Wu Diao's group, but he couldn't remember his name. He said coldly, "Don't you think it's a little too late to escape now?" The ground within a radius of 100 feet suddenly turned into mud. There were sticky spider webs everywhere, which greatly limited the speed of that person. The big palm fell, and that person had no choice but to resist with all his might. There was a loud sound of metal clashing, and the long spear in that person's hand was shattered. His body flew out like a kite with a broken string. In terms of pure explosive power, the ultimate yang hidden palm was second only to Lung Shiqi's divine flash epiphyllum. Coupled with the support of Lung Shiqi's physical strength, he won so easily. However, that person was only seriously injured and was not dead yet. He said in horror, "Let's talk things out. Let's talk things out. We're all here to participate in the elite meeting. There's no need to fight to the death." Lung Shiqi ignored him. He didn't think this way when he attacked Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi's demonic aura rose. A demonic cloud rose, and a demonic dragon with no head or tail appeared. It spat out 2 ferocious demonic dragon claws and tore that person in 2. Leng Shiqi picked up the mustard seed bracelet that was left. In addition to a large amount of resources, there were 4 kilograms of soul stones and 2 tokens. This meant that at least 2 people had died at his hands. They only had 18 people in total. If they counted the green-robed man from before, at least 4 people had died. This fight was more intense than he had imagined. However, Leng Shiqi thought that this person's method was indeed quite creative. He used a secret technique to disguise himself as someone who was neither human nor ghost. Even Leng Shiqi was fooled at first. Most people would test the waters first when they encountered such a situation. They would never fight for real. This gave this person a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He was able to kill 2 people in such a short time. This showed that this method was indeed useful. Leng Shiqi rubbed his chin. Then, a crackling sound came from his body, and his body became short and stooped. He then took out the old man's skin mask that he had used for a long time, and put it on his face. With a thought, he activated the breath-holding technique, and the aura on his body became undulating, making it difficult for others to grasp. Finally, he picked up the bloodstained raincoat on the ground and put it on. Like the previous person, he began to fish. Unfortunately, Leng Shiqi's luck wasn't very good. He waited for half a day but didn't see a single person. However, he wasn't anxious. Perhaps some people were already trapped in the 5 elements area. He believed that with the ability of those people, it wouldn't be a big problem for them to come to the chaos area. Sure enough, on the 2nd day, he finally saw the first fish he waited for. It was a young man wearing light armor. However, his light armor had traces of being broken and burned. It seemed that he came from the fire area and had some injuries on his body. When the young man saw Leng Shiqi, he was slightly stunned. Then he frowned and quickly looked around. There seemed to be a few traces of brown light flashing in his eyes. He did this because he didn't think that there would be a fisherman here for no reason. He began to wonder if he had fallen into an illusion. Splash! A sound attracted the young man's attention. He turned his head and saw Leng Shiqi fishing out a severed arm from the pool. Young man, this old man just caught a fish. It's still fresh. Do you want to take it back and try it? Leng Shiqi imitated the old man's voice and said. When the young man heard this, his face became serious. He hesitated for a few seconds and suddenly smiled brightly. This junior is just passing by. How would I dare to take this senior's things? This old man is in a good mood. Take it. Leng Shiqi said, and threw the severed arm directly at him. The young man dodged subconsciously. However, he didn't expect that at the moment he dodged, Leng Shiqi's figure also disappeared. The next moment, the Devil Advent battle saber appeared, and a terrifying saber light condensed to the extreme slash down. It was a flash in the pan. That young man was already injured, and now that he was caught off guard, he was actually beheaded by Leng Shiqi with a single slash. Today I caught another big fish. It's a good harvest. Chapter 464. Leng Shiqi happily counted the gains he had just obtained. This way of obtaining ill-gotten wealth was really fast. One had to know that those who could enter this small 5 elements Chaos Grotto Heaven were the elites of the Elite Association. They had brought a lot of resources with them. In addition, there were also many soul stones, which made Leng Shiqi earn a lot. Now he had as many as 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones on him. However, this fishing method could not be used for too long because there were only 18 people here. Now, almost half of them were probably dead. Moreover, a few of them were his own people. Therefore, Leng Shiqi planned to earn 2 more batches before stopping. At this moment, he looked at the soul stones in his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then swallowed them all. A full 7 or 8 kilograms of soul stones were refined by Leng Shiqi. Suddenly, a faint golden light bloomed behind his head. That was a sign that he was about to condense a primordial spirit. In the system of spiritual power cultivation, the first spiritual power transformation was to condense a spiritual body and open up a spiritual space. The second qualitative change was to sublimate the spiritual body into a primordial spirit. From then on, the primordial spirit became a second life. Even if the physical body was destroyed, as long as the primordial spirit was alive, one could still live. Generally speaking, only spiritual casters who were in the unity of heaven and man realm were qualified to condense a primordial spirit. Lung Shiqi was showing signs of this now. If this spread out, it would definitely cause an uproar. In fact, Lung Shiqi's spiritual power talent could only be considered good, but it was definitely not the best. The biggest qualitative change in his spiritual power came from the spiritual fantasy world. The spiritual fantasy world could be said to have completely changed Lung Shiqi's spiritual power aptitude. Whether it was the strength of his spiritual power or the potential, it had been raised to a level that was rarely seen. His spiritual fantasy world had also unexpectedly fused with the heavenly Fey Soul Crystal. This thing was constantly increasing Lung Shiqi's spiritual power. Moreover, Lung Shiqi had been using his spiritual power to deduce spiritual techniques for a long time, which greatly improved his spiritual power. Furthermore, he had used the Hell's Curse to absorb remnant souls. Now that he had refined so many soul stones, his spiritual power was finally going to undergo a second transformation. Lung Shiqi sensed it as well. His eyes lit up with joy. He had a feeling that if he refined another 5 kilograms of soul stones, he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. His desire for soul stones grew even stronger. After that, Lung Shiqi continued to pretend to be the old man and fish. In the next 2 days, he successfully caught 2 fish, but one of them escaped. Lung Shiqi didn't chase after the man. Although it might expose his opportunistic methods, he had already planned to stop, so it didn't matter if it was exposed. The other strange thing was that recently, for some reason, some ghosts would often come looking for him. Of course, in the end, they all became Lung Shiqi's soul stones. On this day, when Lung Shiqi was about to remove his disguise, a jade-faced young man walked over. He saw that the surrounding area was a mess caused by several battles, and there were many bloodstains scattered around. The jade-faced young man raised his sword-like eyebrows and said, "Are you a man or a ghost?" Lung Shiqi recognized the jade-faced young man as soon as he saw him. This man was Zhuge-Puha. With a faint smile, Zhuge-Puha looked Lung Shiqi up and down with interest in his eyes. Lung Shiqi knew that his disguise had been seen through, so he simply returned to his original appearance. "Lu Xingji, it's you." Zhuge-Puha wasn't too surprised. Those who could disguise themselves as ghosts and sneak attack others must be very powerful. Lung Shiqi belonged to this group of people. "Brother Lu, you must have gained a lot here." Lung Shiqi smiled and said, "You're flattering me. Why, do you want to have a share of the loot? I heard that Brother Lu once killed a master of Gang Spirit Realm. Your strength is outstanding. I'd like to have a taste of it." A 7-star long sword appeared in Zhuge-Puha's hand, and his body suddenly emitted a strong fighting intent. Lung Shiqi held the black jade sword in his hand, and in an instant, a violent killing intent enveloped Zhuge-Puha. For Lung Shiqi, there was no such thing as a taste of it. There was only fighting to the death. Zhuge-Puha's long sword moved, and a few faint stars appeared in the gray sky. The power of the stars was drawn into the long sword, and suddenly a destructive starlight burst out. Lung Shiqi's sword shook and was covered with a thick layer of bloody light. In an instant, blood chi surged and evil chi raged. Seeing this, Zhuge-Puha frowned slightly. The evil chi released by Lung Shiqi was not just his spiritual technique. Looking at this posture, it was obvious that Lung Shiqi was stained with too much blood. Zhuge-Puha had never seen this level of evil chi from a spirit aperture realm cultivator. Unconsciously, Zhuge-Puha secretly increased his strength. The power of the stars was drawn down by him from the 9th heaven. He pointed the tip of his sword and drew a star map in front of him. The star map unfolded, and everything within 100 feet turned into a starry sky. Lung Shiqi's turbulent evil chi was greatly suppressed in an instant. Interesting, Lung Shiqi thought. He quickly observed the starry sky and found that it seemed to be similar to a trap array, but it was different from ordinary arrays. Zhuge-Puha could set up an array with his bare hands, which was really extraordinary. "Brother Lu's evil chi is too strong. Why don't you wake up first?" Zhuge saw that Leng Shiqi was temporarily suppressed, and said with a slight smirk. Leng Shiqi expressionlessly changed his sword for a blade. The moment the demon arrival blade appeared, it caused the air around him to tremble. 7th rank artifact. Seeing the demon arrival blade, Zhuge was shocked. For a spirit aperture realm cultivator, those who had a 6th rank spirit artifact could be counted on one hand. Leng Shiqi could actually take out a 7th rank artifact. How was this possible? Leng Shiqi held the demon arrival blade, and felt the battle intent and killing intent in the blade. He gathered all the power in his body and compressed it. Zhuge pupils shrank, and his heart inexplicably felt a trace of panic. His expression was finally not as calm as before. His long sword moved continuously and streaks of sword chi stirred up the heaven and earth, sweeping over. Facing these sword chi, Leng Shiqi's expression still did not change. The demon arrival blade in his hand had already begun to vibrate with a buzzing sound, as if it was very excited. Leng Shiqi suddenly swung his blade. Pure demonic chi soared into the sky, and turned into a ray of blade light. The ray of blade light was dozens of feet long. It tore through the starry sky and erased the sword chi, as if it wanted to devour Zhuge as well. Zhuge did not expect that Leng Shiqi could still use such a terrifying blade technique under the suppression of his starry sky array. However, there was no time for him to be shocked. He quickly formed hand seals, and the starlight around him condensed into strange runes. These runes flowed rapidly and disturbed the space around him, making it impossible to see his figure clearly. At the same time, Leng Shiqi's blade light arrived. Chapter 465. Leng Shiqi's saber light was still extinguished by those strange runes. This move of his was not divine ephemeral epiphyllum, but it was purely a demonic ephemeral epiphyllum, based on his demonic aura and devil advent saber. After all, divine flash epiphyllum consumed too much energy. Unless it was a matter of life and death, Leng Shiqi would not use it easily. Facing Zhuge Leng Shiqi could not underestimate him, so he used demon flash epiphyllum. This move was not very powerful, but it was more than enough to break Zhuge starry sky. Zhuge finally blocked Leng Shiqi's blade, but his runes had all dissipated. Seeing that Leng Shiqi was about to continue his attack, he waved his hand and said, "Brother Lu, please wait." Leng Shiqi's movements paused. "Brother Lu's strength is really extraordinary. I admire you. If we were in the outside world, I would definitely be willing to learn from you. But in this secret realm, there are dangers everywhere. I think we should stop." Zhuge put away his long sword and said. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi also put away his devil arrival blade. He was fishing here, mainly targeting those who were not particularly strong and were injured. But for an opponent like Zhuge Leng Shiqi was not confident that he could kill him if he did not use all his strength. Moreover, as Zhuge said, there were ghosts everywhere in this chaotic area. It would be irrational for them to fight to the death. At present, although Leng Shiqi had a slight advantage, neither of them used all their strength. It was best to stop before the real fight started. Seeing that Leng Shiqi had retracted his blade, Zhuge secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had only exchanged 2 or 3 blows, the pressure that Leng Shiqi gave him was too great. The devil arrival blade in Leng Shiqi's hand was terrifying enough. It was a 7th level magical weapon, which even a master of Gang Spirit Realm might not be qualified to own. Zhuge long sword was also a 6th level spiritual weapon, which was rare in the same level. But compared with the devil arrival blade, it was nothing. If they continued to fight, he might lose his spiritual sword. It wasn't just the devil arrival battle saber. Leng Shiqi's spiritual technique and the murderous aura on his body made Zhuge feel a lingering fear. He thought that he was a 1 in a million genius, but today, in this short period of time, the arrogance in his heart had been worn away a little. Leng Shiqi cupped his hands and said, "I won't see you off." After Zhuge left, Leng Shiqi began to carefully examine the Devil Advent battle blade in his hand. When he fought with Zhuge just now, he found that the Devil Arrival blade seemed to be more useful than before. It was not that it was sharper, but there was a faint connection between the two, which made it very easy for him to use. He gently stroked the blade, and the devil arrival blade immediately trembled, as if it was responding to Lung Shiqi. Seeing this, Lung Shiqi raised his eyebrows and showed some joy. Obviously, the devil arrival blade's spirituality was higher than before. It was infinitely close to a 7th level magical weapon. Perhaps this was the reason why Zhuge Puha mistakenly thought that the devil arrival blade was a 7th level magical weapon. Although Lung Shiqi did not know the reason, it was a good thing anyway. After that, he continued to wait here for half a day. Unfortunately, he did not meet anyone else, so he gave up this method and walked towards the center of the chaotic area. However, he did not go far before he suddenly stopped. He looked to the right, where there seemed to be a huge figure walking towards him. Lung Shiqi immediately activated Byakugan. Although Byakugan could not see through things in the chaotic area, it could still greatly enhance his vision. Only then did he see clearly that the thing was several feet tall, wearing heavy gray armor, and had no flesh on its body. It held a gray bone spear in its hand, but its face was covered in a black fog, making it difficult to see its face. However, Lung Shiqi estimated that it was either a rotten zombie face or a skull. Of course, Lung Shiqi did not care about that. He was more concerned about the feeling that this thing gave him. It was very dangerous. Moreover, ever since he entered the chaotic area, he had encountered many ghosts, but almost all of them used illusions to control their enemies. Their actual combat strength was not strong. However, the monster in front of him was the complete opposite. It was just slowly walking over, but it gave Lung Shiqi the feeling of a mountain pressing down on him. Before they even fought, Lung Shiqi knew that this monster would be very difficult to deal with, so he planned to just leave. Anyway, this monster did not seem to be very fast, so he could easily shake it off. However, just as Lung Shiqi was about to leave, the nearby gray fog suddenly twisted. Suddenly, a bone spear several feet long stirred up the wind and clouds, and arrived in the blink of an eye. Lung Shiqi was shocked. The demonic beast blood pattern armor, and the holy silver deer's beast chi battle patterns instantly appeared. He turned into a black and white stream of light, and quickly dodged the spear. Even so, the sharp wind from the spear left a few cracks on his demonic beast blood pattern armor. Seeing this scene, Lung Shiqi's heart sank. If he had been hit directly, his armor would have been shattered. The strength of this monster was actually so strong. At the same time, Lung Shiqi also felt that a consciousness had locked onto him. The source was from this skeleton monster. Now even if he escaped, he would be chased by this monster. In this way, if the monster caught up with him while he was fighting with others, he would be attacked from the back and the front. He suddenly felt that he was very unlucky. Lung Shiqi stared at the skeleton monster, and his eyes flashed with boundless fighting spirit. Since he could not get rid of it, he would kill it. This monster was very strong, but it also had a very obvious weakness, which was that it was very slow. He did not have no chance. On the contrary, it was best at suppressing people with speed. Immediately, Lung Shiqi summoned the Goo King. It turned into a pair of colorful glass wings and soared into the sky. He unsheathed the inky jade sword, and hundreds of triple sword chi poured down. The skeleton monster pulled out its bone spear and suddenly raised its head. Two ferocious blood rays burst out from the black fog. It waved the bone spear, and suddenly a cold wind whistled. The fog in the surrounding 100 feet flowed like a whirlpool, swallowing Lung Shiqi's triple sword chi. However, Lung Shiqi, who was flying in the sky, chuckled. Of course, he did not think that the triple sword chi could hurt the skeleton monster. His purpose was only to attract the skeleton monster's attention. At the same time, 4 Lung Shiqi figures strangely appeared around the skeleton monster. Each Lung Shiqi was quickly forming seals. Rays of light like spider silk shot out and intertwined with each other, and soon weaved into a huge spider web that enveloped the skeleton monster. Finally, the 4 Lung Shiqi pressed their hands together, and the ground where the spider web was located collapsed, forming a muddy swamp. The skeleton monster had just blocked Lung Shiqi's triple sword chi, and it was firmly restrained. Lung Shiqi wanted to continue to expand his advantage in speed. Then the Lung Shiqi in the sky also landed. The 5 of them surrounded the skeleton monster in a pentagonal formation, and 5 different colored formations appeared. Each formation slowly rotated, and star-like light spots condensed one after another. In an instant, countless streams of light surged out and mercilessly strangled the skeleton monster. This was the rotating ice and fire stream light formation after Lung Shiqi's transformation. Chapter 466. Last time, Lung Shiqi had used the ice-fire flowing light array against Ji-1, but Lianyi had recognized it as the 5-god flowing light technique. Therefore, while waiting for the other two teams to complete their missions, he had also improved the ice-fire flowing light array. Not only did it change its appearance, but its power was also increased. Especially after Lung Shiqi had refined a lot of soul stones, his mental strength had increased a lot. With the support of the divine Gu Ring, the ice-fire flowing light array's power was terrifying. The skeleton monster was trapped by the spider webs and swamps. These things were not enough to trap it for a long time, but this little bit of time was enough to make it completely passive. The skeleton monster's armor made ear-piercing clanking sounds under the attack of the endless flowing light, making it difficult for the skeleton monster to move. Soon, the armor on the monster's body began to crack, and a large amount of gray mist began to seep out of the cracks. Seeing that it was effective, Lung Shiqi's spiritual power surged even more violently, and the ice-fire flowing light array became brighter. Ka-ka! More and more cracks appeared on the skeleton monster's body, and finally, it was blasted apart. However, Lung Shiqi frowned. This monster died just like that? This was somewhat different from what he had expected. He had thought that this would be a fierce battle, but it was over just like that? Especially in Lung Shiqi's perception, the aura that locked onto him was still there, so this skeleton monster was not dead. Lung Shiqi did not dare to slack off. As expected, as the rotating frostfire flowing light array gradually dissipated, the broken bodies of the monsters in the surroundings gathered together again with the black fog. In the blink of an eye, the array was restored to its original state. Oh, an immortal body? Lung Shiqi secretly guessed. No, there is no such thing as an immortal body in this world. It just happened to borrow some kind of power. The fog in this chaotic area might be the source of its power. Lung Shiqi looked at the fog that was everywhere in the chaotic area and felt a headache. If his guess was correct, then he could not kill this monster at all. At this moment, the skeleton monster took a step forward, causing the entire ground to tremble slightly. The long spear swept horizontally as if it was 10,000 pounds heavy. The monster's speed was not fast, but its attack speed was very fast. Lung Shiqi's hands pressed down, and a dark golden brilliance flashed, and the ultimate yang hidden palm fell. This large handprint was a spiritual technique that was both offensive and defensive, and it also had a suppressive force. As the large handprint smashed down heavily, a sonorous sound that almost shattered one's eardrums could be heard. The ultimate yang nether passage great palm had actually shattered. However, Lung Shiqi's Mahamudra managed to block about 80% of the skeleton monster's spear's power. The rest of the power was offset by Lung Shiqi's demonic beast blood tattoo armor, and his own physical strength. Lung Shiqi suddenly felt the blood in his body churning. At the same time, he was very surprised that the skeleton monster was so strong. In terms of pure strength, this monster was the strongest opponent Lung Shiqi had ever fought. Facing this monster with obvious strengths and weaknesses, Lung Shiqi also felt that it was very difficult to deal with. No matter how strong your attack was, the monster could resurrect, but if you were hit, you might lose your life. The key was that Lung Shiqi could not think of any way to completely kill it. Even if he used God, Ephemeral Bloom, he was not confident that he could kill it. Lung Shiqi thought about it. Currently, he really did not have many means to restrain this monster. In his opinion, the only way to deal with this monster was to use thunder or divine power. However, although he also practiced the thunder destruction formation and the flower grasping stance, the grades of these two spiritual skills were too low. Even if they could restrain the monster, they would not cause any substantial damage. At this time, a light suddenly flashed in Lung Shiqi's mind. He remembered that he also had a very strong thunder power in his body. That was what he obtained when he absorbed the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone. It was just that Lung Shiqi had never used it before, so he almost forgot about it. Although the Thunder Destruction Formation was a low-level spiritual skill, It was not weak with his current spirit aperture realm 5th level cultivation. With the addition of the thunder power in his body, he might be able to give it a try. As soon as he thought of it, Lung Shiqi's body trembled and instantly split into several phantoms. Each of the phantoms was quickly forming seals. At the same time, thunder burst out from his body, and it was full of crackling sounds. Several phantoms responded to each other, and in an instant, a thunder formation had been formed. Lung Shiqi's hand seals changed, and the thunder power in his body surged out. The originally dark blue thunder turned silver gray. Immediately after, dozens of thunder pillars fell down and fiercely smashed into the skeleton monster's body. The thunder power naturally had a great restraining ability against these evil things. At this moment, under the thunder destruction formation, the skeleton monster's body was twitching and trembling, and there were even traces of mist spreading out. Seeing that the monster was about to be torn apart again, Lung Shiqi's expression became gloomier, because he could deeply feel that the thunder destruction formation could not kill the monster. His thoughts and ideas were correct, and the thunder power did have some effect, but the problem was that the thunder destruction formation's grade was too low. Even if it was supported by the thunder power in the Wind Thunder Divine Luck Stone, it would only be comparable to the power of the rotating ice and fire flowing light array. Furthermore, the power of lightning in his body was not his own. It was stored there. It was like water without a source. Every time he used it, it would be depleted. There was no way to replenish it. Therefore, he could not use the thunder power of this intensity for a long time. This method would not work. Pung! With a loud bang, the skeleton monster shattered again. However, the fragments were slowly gathering back together. It seemed that it would be reborn soon. Lung Shiqi was anxious. He could not be delayed by the skeleton monster. If he consumed too much spiritual power, it would be dangerous. Immediately, he took advantage of the time when the skeleton monster was reborn and quickly opened the system shop interface. He was planning to go to the system shop to try his luck and see if there was anything useful. Unfortunately, the 8 items that entered his eyes were all useless. Lung Shiqi immediately clicked the refresh button, and the items immediately changed to 8 other items. Among them, there was a pill that could directly increase his cultivation. He wanted it, but the price of the pill was not cheap. He was afraid that he would not have enough system coins left after buying it, so he could only reluctantly click the refresh button again. This time, the items that appeared made Lung Shiqi's eyes light up, especially one of the level 6 spiritual skills. Perhaps it could really help him kill the skeleton monster. Level 6 spiritual skill Great Bright Fist, 2000 system coins. Chapter 467. The Great Bright Fist was one of Shaolin's 72 ultimate techniques. Buddhist techniques were naturally effective against all kinds of dark and evil things. The Great Bright Fist also contained a portion of the power of light, so it was even more effective against them. Lung Shiqi did not hesitate for a second. He immediately bought the Great Bright Fist and used his unlimited skill points to start cultivating it. Unfortunately, the Great Bright Fist was a level 6 spiritual technique. Therefore, even if he used his skill points to learn it, it would still take some time. Just as Lung Shiqi cultivated the Great Bright Fist to the minor completion realm, the skeleton monster had already been reborn. Lung Shiqi immediately threw a punch. Suddenly, a burst of light shone brightly. Under this punch, the area within a radius of 100 feet was enveloped in a dense light. The skeleton monster had just been reborn. Under the intertwining of the light, its body began to gradually melt like snow under the scorching sun. However, judging from its aura, the monster was not completely dead. This time, however, its rebirth speed was much slower. Lung Shiqi was secretly delighted when he saw this. His punch was only at the minor completion realm, and it had such an effect. If it was at the great perfection realm, wouldn't it be able to instantly kill the monster? Taking advantage of the gap between the skeleton monster's rebirth, Lung Shiqi used his skill points to upgrade the Great Bright Fist again. After about 10 breaths, his consciousness returned. The Great Bright Fist was already at the Great Perfection realm. After that, the Buddhist radiance around him flourished, and a pure and holy radiance flickered out. A light droning sound resounded as an area of over 1 kilometer around Lung Shiqi was filled with boundless pure and holy Buddhist radiance, and it purified and dispersed everything. The Buddhist light shone like the sun, illuminating the dark sky of the primal chaos region. After a short while, when the Buddhist light dissipated, the skeleton monster's corpse was nowhere to be seen. Lung Shiqi let out a breath of turbid air. Although he was not injured in this battle, the pressure of facing an extremely powerful force still made him tense. Moreover, he had previously fought with Jugapuha. The consecutive battles had drained his spiritual energy. He walked forward and picked up a huge soul stone from the ground. It was left behind by the skeleton monster after its death. He casually weighed it in his hand. This soul stone actually weighed 7 to 8 kilograms. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but smile. Now, all he had to do was find a place to refine the soul stone, and he would be able to condense a primordial spirit. Next, he found a huge rock nearby and used the hand of the earth to hollow it out. He then placed dozens of goo worms around it before drilling into the huge rock to recover his spirit energy. 2 hours later, Lung Shiqi held the skeleton monster's soul stone in his hand and swallowed it with great difficulty. His soul power began to tremble slightly, and traces of strange power spread out, causing his spiritual power to grow rapidly. At this moment, Lung Shiqi was trying to condense his primordial spirit according to the method recorded in the 5-God flowing light technique, and his spiritual illusion world was gradually changing. Lung Shiqi's spiritual body was almost the same as his own, which meant that his spiritual power had almost reached saturation. At this moment, the spiritual body began to shrink again. Time passed little by little, and Lung Shiqi's spiritual body kept shrinking until it was only the size of a palm. However, the spiritual body was constantly blooming with a dazzling green brilliance, just like a small sun. This moment was the most crucial moment for Lung Shiqi to condense his primordial spirit. Spiritual power was originally an intangible thing, but the primordial spirit was substantial. In other words, Lung Shiqi was now undergoing a qualitative change, which was to sublimate the intangible spiritual power into a substantial substance. At this moment, his spiritual power began to flicker. This was the process of a qualitative change. This process could be said to be very important for a spiritual caster, but it was also very dangerous. This was because once the condensation of the primordial spirit failed, it would cause great damage to one's spiritual power, and could even harm one's foundation. Fortunately, Lung Shiqi had refined the soul stone, and had the support of a large amount of spiritual power. This way, it was only a matter of time before he condensed his primordial spirit. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The Heaven Fei Soul Crystal, which had been quietly staying in the illusion world, suddenly trembled. Ever since he opened the illusion world, the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal was like the core of the illusion world. However, this thing had been very quiet for a long time. So much so that Lung Shiqi almost ignored it. But at this moment, the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal suddenly rose from the ground and flew into the air of the illusion world. Then there was a gotcha sound, and the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal actually shattered. Furthermore, it had been shattered into countless pieces, falling down like fine powder. Lung Shiqi was at the critical moment of condensing his primordial spirit. He also noticed that the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal seemed to have changed, but he didn't know what exactly happened. Even if he knew, he was powerless at this moment. After the green powder fell, it slowly circulated around Lung Shiqi's spiritual body. If one looked carefully, they would see that the powder was seeping into Lung Shiqi's spiritual body. For Lung Shiqi, condensing his primordial spirit was a relatively difficult process, and he was prepared for a long battle. But all of a sudden, a familiar force appeared and sped up his progress greatly. Although Lung Shiqi didn't know why, it was a good thing. He immediately used the power of the Heaven Fei Soul Crystal to condense his primordial spirit. Gradually, Lung Shiqi's spiritual body became brighter and brighter. When it reached its peak, all the light suddenly converged. When he looked again, Lung Shiqi's spiritual body had completely materialized. This was the primordial spirit. The moment Lung Shiqi condensed his primordial spirit, the entire illusion world shook. But he didn't panic at all because he knew that the illusion world was about to expand. Sure enough, With the constant shaking, the illusion world's area was expanding to 3 or 4 times its original size. Not only that, the ground under Leng Shiqi's feet completely disappeared and turned into a bottomless sea. This was the spiritual sea that one would only have after condensing their primordial spirit. After the illusion world calmed down, Leng Shiqi curiously pinched his spiritual body. It felt no different from a normal person's. But the strange thing was that his spiritual body was originally green, but now it had turned emerald green. This might be because of the fusion of the Heaven Fei Soul crystal. Although there was a small accident, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Then he remembered something that could only be done after condensing his primordial spirit. In the outside world, Leng Shiqi was motionless with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a blurry brilliance bloomed behind his head, and then a miniature person that looked exactly like him drilled out of his head. This was the projection of the primordial spirit. Leng Shiqi felt very strange at this time. In his current vision, there were some lines of different colors. These lines were thick and thin, long and short. Although they seemed a little messy, there was an indescribable mysterious charm flowing in them. He even felt that he seemed to be more compatible with this world. This subtle feeling was difficult to describe with words. However, before Leng Shiqi could continue to experience it, an extreme sense of exhaustion suddenly came, and even the scene in front of him blurred. Leng Shiqi was shocked and didn't dare to hesitate at all. He quickly controlled his primordial spirit to enter his body. His face instantly turned pale, and he felt as if there were countless sharp needles piercing back and forth in his brain. He adjusted his breath for a while before feeling better. This was because his primordial spirit had just been condensed and was still too weak to withstand the slightest damage. In fact, Leng Shiqi was bold. If it was an ordinary spirit caster, they would never dare to directly use their primordial spirit after condensing their primordial spirit. They would at least have to recuperate for a few months before daring to try it, but Leng Shiqi had no one to guide him and didn't know the risks. Fortunately, his primordial spirit had fused with the Heaven Fei Soul crystal and was much more solid. That was why he could stay in the outside world for 2 or 3 breaths of time. Otherwise, his primordial spirit would inevitably dissipate. Chapter 468. Leng Shiqi took a few deep breaths with lingering fear. His joy from condensing a primordial spirit had also dissipated. At this moment he suddenly heard a faint voice coming from outside. There were people nearby. Leng Shiqi immediately activated Supercilious Eye. Originally, Supercilious Eye didn't have much use in this chaotic region. However, after condensing a primordial spirit, his mental power had a qualitative leap, and Supercilious Eye's effect had also increased. Now he could already scout out a range of 300 meters. He immediately saw the appearance of 2 spiritual auras, and he recognized both of them. These 2 were Dichuan and Buyangqiu. However, the strange thing was that Buyangqiu's aura was very weak. He was only at the 2nd level of the spirit aperture realm. Leng Shiqi remembered that Buyangqiu had stayed in the wood region before. He must have been trapped there for a long time, which caused his cultivation to drop quite a bit. At this moment, the 2 of them were talking. This is too unlucky. Why are there so many monsters nearby? Dichuan didn't seem to be in a good mood as he said angrily. We are already quite close to the center. It is normal for there to be more monsters. Thanks to Brother D's care, I was able to survive until now. I really don't have anything to repay you with. Buyangqiu said with a slightly flattering tone. He had no choice but to flatter. He had followed Dong Fengqi in the beginning of the elite meeting. At that time, Dong Fengqi and Dichuan had competed for the position of leader, so their relationship wasn't that good. Buyangqiu also used all his trump cards to leave the wood region. Now that his strength was greatly damaged, he could only rely on Dichuan to have some hope of surviving. Therefore, he had no choice but to lower his head. Actually, the 2 of them didn't expect the competition to be so fierce before they entered the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. In their impression, the elite meeting was at most a competition between everyone. There had never been a situation of life and death. However, this minor 5 elements chaos paradise was filled with killing intent. Not only were there great dangers in every region, The most dangerous thing was actually the people. Dichuan had come from the metal region. He had also encountered an assassination attempt in the metal region. In the end, he had relied on his profound cultivation to kill his opponent. It was also because of this matter that Dichuan brought Wuxia with him, treating him as a shield. Boom! Just as they were talking, a huge rock not far away suddenly exploded. The two of them instantly activated their protective spiritual armors and looked over with great vigilance. Dichuan tightly grasped the Tier 6 spiritual sword. He vaguely saw a figure among the fragments of the boulder, and that figure was somewhat familiar. "Don't be nervous, it's me." Lung Shiqi's voice came over, causing both of them to be slightly stunned, but it immediately turned into joy. Lung Shiqi's strength was obvious to all. It would be safer to meet up with him. "So it's Brother Liu." "Greetings, Brother Liu." Wuxia lowered his posture even more in front of Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi looked at the two of them, and found that there were more or less injuries on their bodies. It seemed that the journey had not been smooth. The reason why he appeared to meet up with them was naturally because of Dichuan's strength. Dichuan's cultivation was originally at the 9th layer of the Spirit Aperture realm. Adding on the fact that he had a Tier 6 spiritual weapon in hand, his strength could definitely rank in the top 10 among all the participants of the elite meeting. Lung Shiqi naturally could not let go of such a person. Moreover, they had already made a deal before entering the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. As for Wuxia, although his cultivation had decreased and his battle strength was not much, he was still useful. For example, he could travel through the mines. However, just as they met, before they could say more, a huge explosion suddenly came over. This explosion was so loud that it even stirred up the gray fog in the sky and caused the earth to fiercely shake a few times. What's going on? This was the thought that appeared in the minds of Lung Shiqi and the others at the same time. Such a huge commotion definitely meant that something had happened. They had to go and take a look. The three of them looked at each other, and then tacitly ran in the direction of the explosion. However, in this chaotic area, whether it was vision or perception, it was greatly suppressed. Moreover, there could be hidden monsters everywhere, so their speed was not fast. After about an hour, they finally arrived near the source of the explosion. When they saw the scene here, they all revealed shocked expressions. What they saw was a staircase that connected the heavens and the earth. This staircase was entirely gray-brown and looked very broken. Each staircase was abnormally wide, and was the size of a small square. Its starting point was a sticky black pool. The staircase intertwined upwards, and in some places, it even stood in the air and went straight into the clouds. So much so that no one knew what was at the end of the staircase. Lung Shiqi carefully sized up this strange staircase. He quietly opened his supercilious eyes, and then felt many auras on the staircase. Those were the auras of monsters. This also meant that there were actually many monsters hidden up there. If they rashly went up, they would definitely not have a good ending. Then he looked around and found that there were already a few people coming over. Wu Diyao and Zhuge Puha, who he had fought with before, were all present. They were not alone. There were 2 people standing beside Wu Diyao, both of whom were at the late stage of the Spirit Aperture realm. Zhuge Puha was a bit pitiful. He only had one helper, a graceful woman. No one said anything and just silently observed. Just like that, more than 2 hours passed, and no one else came here. This also meant that it was very likely that only the 8 of them were still alive. When they came in, there were 18 of them. Every one of them could be said to be a genius among geniuses. In the future, they could all become powerful experts, but now 10 of them had already fallen. In fact, there were quite a few that died at the hands of Lung Shiqi. What surprised him was that Dong Fengqi had also fallen. Dong Fengqi was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture realm. After destroying the Extreme Fire Manor, he had also received a lot of resources. He definitely had some life-saving items in his hands, but he still died here. Of course, what worried Lung Shiqi the most was Delta Origi. At this moment, Delta Origi still had not appeared. Could she have died as well? Although Delta Origi's cultivation was not high, she had always been cautious. Who knew how many trump cards she had hidden? If she died just like that, Lung Shiqi would definitely not believe it. But if she didn't die, why didn't she come here? Could it be that she was injured, or trapped by something? Lung Shiqi's brows were tightly knitted together, and he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. But at this moment, Bu Yangqiu suddenly shouted, "There's a figure on the staircase." Chapter 469. Hearing this, Lung Shiqi suddenly looked up. Sure enough, he saw a blurry figure suddenly appear on a flight of stairs dozens of feet high. Lung Shiqi's eyes narrowed. No, it wasn't just one, but a group. From afar, there seemed to be a large group of strange figures struggling and roaring. The strange thing was that Lung Shiqi didn't notice these figures when he first came here. Why was that? When the others saw those figures, they all frowned. Obviously, those strange figures were definitely not good people. Then, what should they do next? Should they climb the stairs to the sky and try to break through, or continue to wait and see? Back then, Lei Mian had said that this small 5 elements chaos paradise could only last for 7 days at most. Now more than half of the time had passed. He just didn't know if they would be teleported out when the time was up, or if they would be locked in here forever. Lung Shiqi felt that it was more likely to be the latter. Everyone was serious about this test. If they didn't choose to climb the stairs in the end, perhaps no one would pass the test. However, Lung Shiqi didn't want to be a guinea pig. It would be best if someone could go up first and see what dangers were inside. Not only Lung Shiqi, but Wu Diao and Zhuge Puha also had the same idea. The three of them exchanged glances in the air, and understood each other's intentions. Wu Diao immediately turned around and discussed with the other two. Zhuge Puha also said something to the woman next to him. The woman suddenly showed a bitter expression. At this time, Bu Yangqiu, who was next to Lung Shiqi, took the initiative to stand up and said, "Brother Lu, let me go and check the situation first." Bu Yangqiu was very self-aware. He knew that the reason why Di Chuan and Lung Shiqi brought him was not because they had any feelings for him, but because they wanted him to take the risk. He was very clear in his heart, so he also knew that he had to stand up at this time. Rather than being forcefully thrown down the stairs, it would be better to take the initiative and save some face for himself. Lung Shiqi looked at Bu Yangqiu with praise and then nodded, "Be careful." Not long after, the three of them surged with spirit energy and arrived at the beginning of the stairs. Aside from Bu Yangqiu, there was a middle-aged man named Wang Zhu and a woman named Shi Feiying. Among them, Shi Feiying's cultivation was the highest at the 8th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Wang Zhu was second at the 7th layer. Only Bu Yangqiu's cultivation was the lowest, only at the initial stage of the spirit aperture realm. Therefore, Shi Feiying and Wang Zhu both stood half a body behind Bu Yangqiu. This was not because they respected him, but because they wanted Bu Yangqiu to go up first. Bu Yangqiu felt bitter, but he didn't have any other choice. Who told him to be the weakest here? The weak was a bandit. It was that simple. Bu Yangqiu raised his head and looked at the endless stairs. He took a deep breath and swallowed a pill. The blood and qi in his body surged, and his aura rose back to the 5th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Lung Shiqi's eyes revealed a strange look. The pill that Bu Yangqiu swallowed was called the blood spirit pill. After taking it, it would use one's own blood and qi as fuel to greatly increase one's cultivation for a short period of time. It was a higher level method than burning one's essence blood. Lung Shiqi knew about this pill because he was the one who gave it to Bu Yangqiu. Of course, it wasn't here, but distributed after plundering the resources of the bipolar village. Lung Shiqi also had a blood spirit pill on him. It could be said that this pill was the last resort. Bu Yangqiu chose to swallow it at this time because he clearly thought that this was the moment he had to fight with his life on the line. Bu Yangqiu stepped onto the first step. In the blink of an eye, one could see the spirit armor on his body suddenly distort. Even his body suddenly fell down. Seeing this scene, the others all revealed strange expressions. Lung Shiqi felt that this scene was very familiar. Bu Yangqiu shouted, "The gravity here seems to have suddenly increased, but it is still within an acceptable range." After adapting a few times, he stood up straight as if the gravity wasn't very strong. Lung Shiqi had stayed in the Earth region for a while, and knew that the gravity there was very strong. Even if he activated the demonic beast blood rune armor, it would still be a bit difficult. The gravity on the stairs has also increased. It seems that it has something to do with the Earth region. I wonder if the gravity will always be like this, or will it get stronger? Leng Shiqi secretly guessed. Then he signaled for Bu Yangqiu to continue forward. At the same time, Shi Feiying and Wang Zhu also stepped onto the first step. They were already prepared in advance. Moreover, their cultivations were at the late stage of the spirit aperture realm, so their bodies only shook a few times before stabilizing. The three of them stayed on the first step for a while. After discovering that there were no other abnormalities, they cautiously stepped onto the second step. Bu Yangqiu was the first. When he reached the second step, he suddenly felt that the gravity on his body had increased by a bit. The gravity didn't increase by much, but Bu Yangqiu's expression was very ugly, because when he looked up, there were still countless steps in front of him. If the gravity became stronger, he wouldn't be able to walk far before being completely crushed. More importantly, he had taken the blood spirit pill to temporarily recover his cultivation. Once the effects of the pill disappeared, he would fall into a period of weakness. At that time, what should he do? Noticing Bu Yangqiu's expression, Leng Shiqi didn't need to think too much to know that the gravity had definitely increased. If the gravity on the stairway to heaven was as strong as the Earth region, then it would be troublesome. One had to know that there were still countless monsters hidden in this stairway. However, Bu Yangqiu and the other two had just entered the stairway, so those monsters hadn't appeared yet. Under such a strong gravity, how could they fight against the monsters? Leng Shiqi raised his head to look at the stairway that pierced through the clouds. He didn't think that this stairway would only have gravity as an obstacle. There must be other mechanisms in place. Smoothly climbing the stairway to heaven wasn't an easy task. As Bu Yangqiu and the other two continued to move forward, everyone's gaze was also fixed on them. When the three of them reached the 11th step, a sudden change occurred. The first to bear the brunt was still Bu Yangqiu. When he stepped onto the 11th step, he immediately felt that the gravity had increased by a large amount. What was even more terrifying was that two clouds of gray smoke suddenly appeared, and two irregular-shaped monsters emerged from within. These two monsters looked like two clouds that had been pinched. They didn't have hands or feet, and only had a ferocious huge mouth. They opened their mouths and bit towards Bu Yangqiu and the other two. Chapter 470. Shi Feiying and Wang Zhu were startled by the sudden appearance of the monsters, but Bu Yangqiu was already prepared for battle. He sent out two palms in succession. Each palm contained a strong gale force and instantly sent the two monsters flying. Shi Feiying also reacted. She stretched out her 5 fingers and 5 crimson crystal-like finger energy shot out. Wang Zhu waved her big sleeve, and a thick wave of power swept out. The 3 spirit aperture realm cultivators attacked at the same time, and the 2 monsters were easily killed. From the strength of the monsters, they seemed to be between the spirit pulse realm and the spirit aperture realm. They posed no threat to Bu Yangqiu and the others. Shi Feiying and Wang Zhu both looked at Bu Yangqiu. The weakest of the 3, Bu Yangqiu, was the first to react. This made the 2 of them lose face. In fact, before Bu Yangqiu entered the stairway, Leng Shiqi had already secretly told him that there were some monsters hidden here, and told him to be vigilant at all times. That was why he reacted so quickly. Pata pata. At this moment, 2 crisp sounds attracted their attention. The 3 of them turned around and saw 2 thumb-sized soul stones falling from the sky. Not only Bu Yangqiu and the others, but even Leng Shiqi and the others who were observing from below were shocked. Such weak monsters could actually drop such large soul stones. A thumb-sized soul stone was actually not that big, but they had killed many monsters along the way. Generally speaking, monsters that could drop such a large soul stone were quite troublesome. However, the 2 monsters just now were clearly not troublesome enough. Everyone's eyes lit up. It seemed that it was easier to obtain soul stones on this stairway. The key to whether or not they could pass this test was the soul stone. Immediately after, Bu Yangqiu quickly picked up a soul stone. Shi Feiying also grabbed one. Only Wang Zhu was a step slower and was extremely vexed. The appearance of the soul stones made Wu Diyao, Zhuge Puha, and the others unable to sit still. Zhuge Puha, who was all alone, stepped on the 7 stars. His body shone with starlight, and in a few flashes he stepped onto the sky stairway. He went all the way to Shi Feiying's side. Wu Diao followed closely behind. He only took a light step and instantly arrived at the entrance of the stairway to heaven. He didn't use any protective spiritual armor, or anything like that. He just walked up the stairway to heaven as if the gravity didn't exist at all. Now, only Leng Shiqi and Dichuan had not moved. Dichuan actually wanted to go, but Leng Shiqi did not move. Leng Shiqi's gaze was fixed on the ghostly figure that was several tens of feet high. Just now he actually felt a familiar aura from there. Unfortunately, that aura only flashed for a moment, and before he could identify it, it disappeared again. However, he didn't think too much about it. As long as he reached that place, he would definitely know who it was. With a thought, Leng Shiqi put on the demonic beast bloodrune armor and used the ghostly spring steps. He arrived at the beginning of the stairway to heaven like a ghost. At this moment, he hesitated for a moment. He quickly looked around, but he still didn't see the figure in his heart. In the end, he looked at the ghostly shadows with a hint of hope in his eyes. Finally, he stepped onto the first step. After stepping onto the stairway, he felt the gravity on his body suddenly become twice as strong. However, this degree of gravity was not enough to affect him. He adapted for a moment and continued to walk forward. As he stepped onto the stairway to heaven, the gravity also slowly became stronger. When he reached the 11th step where Wuxia was, the gravity was already 5 times stronger. The remaining 8 people gathered on the 11th step. Fortunately, the stairway to heaven was very wide, so it wasn't too crowded with all of them standing there. Among the 8 people, Wu Diyao was the most relaxed. He cultivated an earth element cultivation method, which was of the same origin as the gravity space. The pressure on him was the least. In other words, Wu Diyao could be said to have a certain advantage at this moment. Therefore, his threat was also increased by a lot. The 8 people gathered and naturally divided into 3 groups. Next, Wu Diyao took the lead and stepped onto the 12th step. At this moment, 2 unknown monsters appeared on the stairway at the same time. In terms of aura, they were stronger than before. Wu Diyao's expression didn't change. He casually waved his hand, and a yellow light rippled out. The 2 monsters were twisted and shattered. It was the first time Leng Shiqi saw Wu Diyao in action, so he couldn't help but take a few more glances. What Wu Diyao used didn't seem to be an ordinary spiritual skill, nor did it seem like a spiritual skill. It was similar to the hand of the earth that he used before. It was some kind of secret technique. As the monsters died, they dropped 2 soul stones. Wu Diyao naturally put them away. Next, Zhuge Puha stepped onto the 13th step. The scene here was almost the same as before. Leng Shiqi stepped onto the 14th step, and also casually killed 2 monsters. The 3 of them didn't have much communication. They just took turns to walk up the stairway and kill monsters to obtain soul stones. To be able to reach this step, none of them were fools. On the contrary, each one of them was more shrewd than the other. They all knew that it would be the stupidest thing to do at this moment. Like the current method, there would be someone to test the next step for you and also take turns to obtain soul stones. Why not? Just like that, the 8 of them quickly walked up to the 21st step. When they reached here, the gravity clearly increased again. It was almost 8 times stronger. Buyangqiu's face was already a bit pale. What was even more troublesome was that the monsters that appeared changed from 2 to 3. Furthermore, the strength of the monsters that appeared now also increased. They were already comparable to Spirit Aperture Realm cultivators at the 2nd or 3rd level. Everyone's heart sank. It was already so difficult at the 20th step. What kind of terrifying danger would there be later? However, they definitely wouldn't retreat. Right now they already had no way out. They could only continue to charge forward. The good thing was that the current level of danger was still within their acceptable range. It was just that their speed of advancement had decreased. As time passed, everyone walked higher and higher. The monsters they encountered also became stronger and stronger. The gravity on their bodies also became stronger and stronger. About an hour later, they finally arrived at the place filled with ghostly shadows. And this place was the 51st step. The moment everyone stepped onto the stairway, Bu Yangqiu's body paused, and he almost fell to the ground. Chapter 471. At level 51, the gravity was comparable to the Earth region. Even Lung Shiqi's demonic beast blood pattern armor would occasionally whine as it couldn't withstand the pressure. Bu Yangqiu had consumed the blood spirit pill and was gradually burning his essence blood. At this moment, his body was already in shambles. Facing both internal and external problems, Bu Yangqiu directly knelt on the ground and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Among everyone, only Lung Shiqi gave him a few more glances. Everyone else turned a blind eye. They could all see that Bu Yangqiu was an arrow at the end of its flight. At this moment, everyone was enduring the terrifying gravity. Who would have the time to care about others? Lung Shiqi looked at Bu Yangqiu. His heart was still somewhat shaken. After all, they had experienced the battle that destroyed the extreme fire manor together. However, he was also helpless in Bu Yangqiu's situation. He also knew that once the effects of the blood spirit pill wore off, Bu Yangqiu wouldn't even be able to withstand the gravity and would be crushed to death. Bu Yangqiu was even more aware of his own situation. He said with difficulty, "Brother Lu, you should also have a blood spirit pill. I'm willing to exchange all my soul stones and tokens for a blood spirit pill." However, Lung Shiqi shook his head and said, "It's not that I'm not willing. It's just that there's no need. You've already burned more than half of your essence blood. Even if I give you another blood spirit pill, it's useless." Despair immediately appeared in Bu Yangqiu's eyes. He even began to regret passing the first test. Otherwise, he would have returned to his province by now. Although he wouldn't achieve much in the future, at least he would still be alive. But now, not only did his cultivation fall, he couldn't even protect his own life. At this moment, Lung Shiqi said, "But there's a way that might save your life." His words gave rise to hope in Bu Yangqiu's heart. He hurriedly asked, "What is it?" "Go back." Lung Shiqi pointed behind Bu Yangqiu. "Go back the way you came and leave the stairway. With your strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to protect yourself in the chaotic region for a while. After we leave, this trial will be over, and you will have a chance to survive." The hope that had just risen in Bu Yangqiu's eyes dimmed again. If it was really so simple, he wouldn't have come up at all. He was afraid that Lei Mayan would close the minor 5 elements primal chaos paradise. If that happened, what awaited him would still be death. "That's all I have to say. The choice is still up to you." Lung Shiqi shrugged his shoulders and said, "If you insist on exchanging for the blood spirit pill, I would be happy to do so." Alas. Bu Yangqiu, on the other hand, sighed deeply. He knew that he wouldn't be able to last much longer. He was even more aware that the effect of the pill was about to wear off. At that time, he would be dead for sure. If he went back the way he came from, there might still be a sliver of hope. He wanted to go and see if Lei Mayan would directly close the secret realm. "It seems that I underestimated the dangers of this stairway. Never mind, Brother Lu, Brother Di, let's part ways here." Bu Yangqiu had always been able to recognize himself. He dejectedly bade farewell and turned to leave. From the beginning to the end, no one gave him a second glance. Everyone's attention was attracted by the ghostly shadows that were flying all over the sky. At this time, Lung Shiqi focused his eyes and discovered that there were several hundred ghostly shadows of different shapes flying around randomly. However, between the ghostly shadows, he could faintly see that there seemed to be a person sitting in the center of the ghostly shadows. But in the next moment, the ghostly shadows whizzed past and nothing could be seen. Lung Shiqi took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him, and quietly opened his supercilious eyes. He shockingly discovered that there was indeed a person among the ghostly shadows. That was Delta Origi. After discovering Delta Origi, Lung Shiqi was pleasantly surprised. However, a series of doubts also followed. How did Delta Origi appear here in advance? Why was she surrounded by so many ghostly shadows? What exactly did she experience? Lung Shiqi's heart was filled with questions. However, he sensed that there was something wrong with the spiritual energy in Delta Origi's body. He used his supercilious eyes to carefully examine the situation in Delta Origi's body. Only then did he discover that Delta Origi's cultivation was already at the 3rd level of the Spirit Aperture realm. However, not long ago, Delta Origi was clearly still at the 1st level of the Spirit Aperture realm. Furthermore, they had stayed in the wood region for a period of time, so their cultivation had regressed slightly. In just a few days, Delta Origi's cultivation had actually increased dramatically. This made Lung Shiqi very puzzled. Hiss! At this moment, the ghostly shadows suddenly let out bursts of hissing sounds. Soon after, they began to madly rush towards Delta Origi. This sudden scene caused Wu Diao and the others to retreat. They thought that the ghostly shadows were about to attack them. Lung Shiqi was also shocked. Just as he was about to make a move, he saw layers of ghostly flames suddenly appear around Delta Origi. The ghostly shadows' movements immediately stopped. It seemed that they were very afraid of Delta Origi's ghostly flames, and did not dare to take a step forward. However, the appearance of the ghostly flames also made the others feel the fluctuation of spiritual energy. They also knew that there was someone among the ghostly shadows. At the same time, they were greatly shocked. Who had entered the stairway in advance and caused such a huge commotion? Among them, the ones who were the most puzzled were Zhuge Puha and Shi Feiying. The two of them were the first to discover the stairway, and were also the first to arrive. However, they did not see anyone coming up. Lung Shiqi's heart slowly calmed down. Delta Origi really did have some trump cards. It seemed that these ghostly shadows were temporarily unable to do anything to Delta Origi. However, Delta Origi's next move caused his heart to instantly jump to his throat. The ghostly flames around Delta Origi's body seemed to be blown by a gust of wind. Suddenly, they swayed and revealed a gap. Of course, the ghostly shadows would not miss this opportunity. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen ghostly shadows crawled through the gap. Not good. Lung Shiqi was secretly shocked. A shocking evil aura emerged and attached a layer of evil aura to the demonic beast blood pattern armor, causing the gravity on his body to weaken a little. Lung Shiqi clenched his ink jade sword and was about to rush out. However, his movements stopped again. In his Byakugan vision, after the ghostly shadows crawled into the gap, they were pulled by a strange force and could not move. Then, a huge skull appeared behind Delta Origi. The skull opened its mouth and spat out a large cloud of strange smoke that enveloped the ghostly shadows. When the smoke dissipated, the ghostly shadows that had crawled in had disappeared without a trace. This situation caused Lung Shiqi to suddenly stop. It seemed that those ghostly shadows were purposely let in by Delta Origi. What was the purpose of Delta Origi? Then, Lung Shiqi's eyes suddenly shrank. He discovered that on Delta Origi's back, several star-like light spots lit up one after another. Her spiritual power cultivation suddenly skyrocketed and broke through to the 4th level of the Spirit Aperture realm in an instant. Delta Origi was actually using these ghostly shadows to increase her cultivation. Chapter 472. Delta Origi was actually using these ghostly shadows to improve her cultivation. Although Lung Shiqi didn't know how Delta Origi did it, it was clear that this was a rare opportunity for Delta Origi. Opportunities always coexisted with danger. Delta Origi could turn the crisis of being haunted by evil spirits into an opportunity for herself. That was her ability. Moreover, Lung Shiqi could see that Delta Origi's spiritual power was becoming more and more stable through his Byakugan. This meant that she still had room to improve, so he couldn't disturb her now. Lung Shiqi's eyes silently turned to the other people. He thought to himself, those people should also know that there is someone in the ghostly shadows, but they don't know who is inside. I have to delay them for a while. So he said, everyone, I feel the fluctuation of spiritual power in the depths of the ghostly shadows. I'm afraid that someone is trapped inside. Yes, but who could that person be? And when did he come here? Zhuge Puha asked. He was also puzzled. Wu Diao crossed his arms and said carelessly, who cares who he is? He's quite capable to be able to survive until now after being surrounded by so many ghostly shadows. Why don't we let this person help us test these ghostly shadows? It's best if we can find their weakness. Your wishful thinking is good. But have you ever thought that the person trapped is one of your people? Why don't we work together to deal with the ghostly shadows? Xi Feiying said with one hand on her waist. Hearing this, Wu Diyao smiled and didn't answer, because he could see that Xi Feiying was a little anxious. From the looks of it, there were only 7 people standing here, and 3 of them were on Wu Diyao's side. In addition to Wang Zhu, there was a person with dark skin who was also at the 8th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. Although there were only 2 people, Leng Shiqi and Di Chuan. Di Chuan was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm. In terms of strength, he was not much weaker than Wu Diyao and Zhuge Puha. As for Leng Shiqi, it was needless to say that he was a fierce man who had killed a master of Gang Spirit Realm. His strength was definitely the strongest among them. Therefore, Zhuge Puha and Xi Feiying were the weakest among the 3 parties in terms of both numbers and strength. This caused Xi Feiying's heart to be filled with anxiety and uneasiness. If it was their people who were besieged by the phantoms, it would be best if they could rescue them. Leng Shiqi, of course, did not want the situation to turn cold. He continued, "Both of you have a point, but it seems that the person inside is still holding on. Why don't we wait and see? If that person can't hold on any longer, it won't be too late for us to make a move." Wu Diyao thought for a moment. Even if he managed to rescue them by then, they wouldn't be able to fight anymore. So he nodded to show that he could agree. Zhuge Puha and Xi Feiying could only agree, both sides taking a step back. In this way, they stood there quietly. Everyone found that the number of phantoms would decrease after a while. Although the decrease was not much, after half an hour, the number of phantoms had decreased by half. Except for Leng Shiqi, the other people's expressions became a little strange. Judging from this situation, the phantoms did not seem to be a big threat to the person inside. And as the number of phantoms decreased, they could also see that the person sitting inside was a woman. Among the 18 people who had entered the minor 5 elements Chaos Wonderland, there were only 3 women. Coincidentally, these 3 women belonged to 3 different parties. This also meant that the person inside was definitely not from Zhuge Puha's party. At this time, Wu Diyao had an idea. From the fluctuation of spiritual power of Delta Origi, he sensed that she was at the middle stage of Spirit Aperture Realm, which was the same as the women in his group. Therefore, he was sure that the person trapped inside was definitely one of his people. Wu Diao's attitude immediately changed and he said, "Now that the number of phantoms has decreased greatly, I think it's time for us to make a move." However, Xi Feiying wasn't willing to do that. Once she rescued them, Wu Diao's forces would become even more powerful. She wouldn't do something like helping her enemy. Zhuge Puha remained silent. No one knew what he was thinking. Wu Diyao looked at Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi said indifferently, "There's no rush. Since that person was able to hold on until now, he must have some ability. Let's wait and see." Emph. Wu Diyao suddenly snorted. However, Leng Shiqi and the others' reaction was within his expectations. He muttered, "If you guys don't make a move, I'll make a move myself." The reason why he wanted to join forces with Leng Shiqi and Zhuge Puha was just to conserve his spiritual power. One had to know that they were still in a gravity that was dozens of times higher than normal. They had to consume spiritual power at every moment to resist the gravity. Naturally, they had to conserve as much spiritual power as possible. Since Leng Shiqi and the others refused to make a move, Wu Diyao had to ask the 2 people beside him to do it themselves. With a flash of spiritual light, a heavy hammer appeared in Wu Diao's hand. It was an extremely rare spiritual weapon. Just as he was about to save the person, a person stopped him. It was Leng Shiqi. Wu Diao's face immediately darkened. "Brother Liu, what do you mean by this?" "I said let's wait and see," Leng Shiqi still said in a very flat tone, but his tone was full of unquestionable. His tone immediately irritated Wu Diyao, but Wu Diyao did not get angry. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Lu Xingji, what do you want to do? I don't want to repeat the same words for the 3rd time." Don't think that you're so great just because you've killed a person in the Gang Spirit Realm. Wang Zhu Mu Qinglin. Wu Diyao shouted in a low voice. Wang Zhu and the other person moved quickly. The 3 people instantly surrounded Leng Shiqi. With a zung, Di Chuan unsheathed his spirit sword and pointed it at Wang Zhu. The two sides instantly drew their swords. Zhuge and Shi Feiying looked at each other and quietly took 2 steps back. They looked like they were going to watch the tigers fight. Wu Diao saw that Leng Shiqi was not backing down, and saw that Zhuge was watching the show. For a moment he was in a difficult position. The main reason was that he was not confident that he could defeat Leng Shiqi. Even if he cultivated an earth attribute cultivation method, and had some home ground advantage, he was not confident. The situation was in a deadlock. However, a sudden phenomenon broke the stalemate. Suddenly, a raging ghost fire suddenly rose into the air. It was clearly fire, but it made the surroundings gloomy and terrifying as if they had fallen into hell. Leng Shiqi and the others, who were still opposing each other, immediately retreated. Leng Shiqi raised his hand and released layers of cold air to block the ghost fire. At the same time, he used his supercilious eyes to investigate what was happening. What he saw gave him a fright. It turned out that the Delta Orgi had gathered all the remaining ghosts at the same time. Under the cover of the ghost fire, the huge skull appeared again and swallowed all the ghosts. Chapter 473. The sudden change caused Leng Shiqi, Wu Diao, and the others to stop what they were doing. The appearance of the willow. The wisp also caused Wu Diao's expression to turn ugly. This was because the girl in his group cultivated a gold attribute cultivation method. It was impossible for her to use such a strange flame. This also meant that the person inside was definitely Leng Shiqi's group's blood moon. From this, it could be seen that Leng Shiqi already knew about this. But why didn't Leng Shiqi save his own people? There must be something fishy about this. Wu Diao originally didn't have the confidence to defeat Leng Shiqi and Di Chuan. If the other side had one more person, then Leng Shiqi's group would really be invincible. He definitely couldn't let this happen. On the other side, Zhuge had been silently observing. He finally realized that Delta Origi was actually using Ghost Shadow to increase their cultivation. This method was simply appalling, but Zhuge didn't care about this. His thoughts were the same as Wu Diao's. They couldn't let Leng Shiqi's group become stronger. Thus, Zhuge didn't hesitate to make a move. His spirit sword was unsheathed. In a split second, starlight shone like a dream as it attacked the ghost fire. Wu Diao's movements weren't slow either. The heavy hammer in his hand suddenly smashed into the ground. The stairs undulated up and down like a wave, sweeping over with terrifying spirit energy. Shi Feiying, Wang Zhu, and Mu Qinglin also made a move together, intending to kill Delta Origi. Scram! Leng Shiqi suddenly let out a low roar, and a small crystal bug suddenly flew out. Soon after, the bug bloomed with a brilliant light, covering Leng Shiqi's blood beast armor with a layer of multicolored flowing clothes. At the same time, a jade-like blood pattern appeared on Leng Shiqi's forehead. It was the blood mark of serenity. Under the buff of the Gu King's possession, and the blood mark of serenity, Leng Shiqi's spirit pressure directly soared to the 8th or 9th level of the spirit aperture realm. It was also at this time that Di Chuan finally made his move. The Tier 6 spirit sword in his hand actually split into 2, becoming a red and a black double sword. Di Chuan swung his swords, and a destructive and bloody sword intent swept out. His target was Wang Zhu. Wang Zhu's cultivation was the lowest among the few people present. This was the so-called pick the soft persimmon. Wang Zhu also sighed inwardly and had no choice but to fight with Di Chuan. Wu Diao couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Even without Wang Zhu, there are still 4 late-stage spirit aperture realm experts attacking at the same time. How can you deal with them alone? However, what Wu Diao did not expect was that in this incomparably gloomy chaotic region, there would suddenly be a dazzling rain of petals. He subconsciously looked up and saw countless colorful petals falling from the sky, like a goddess scattering flowers. It was so dazzling that even Wu Diao himself was almost immersed in it. Wu Diao hurriedly bit his tongue to wake up. He was secretly shocked. When did these colorful petals appear? And when did they almost make him fall into it? What made him even more shocked was that Leng Shiqi, who was clearly standing next to him, had disappeared without a trace. He turned his head again and found that other than Zhuge who was still clear-headed, Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin's eyes were somewhat dull. It was obvious that they had fallen into an illusion. No matter what, they were still late-stage spirit aperture realm experts. How was it possible that they were instantly pulled into an illusion? A few days ago, Leng Shiqi was indeed unable to do this. However, after refining many spirit stones, his mental strength had skyrocketed, and he had already condensed a primordial spirit. His mental strength had a qualitative leap, and he was already able to instantly trap several late-stage spirit aperture realm cultivators. Immediately after, the petals that filled the sky suddenly spun rapidly and shot out triple extinction sword chi. In an instant, the tyrannical sword chi that covered the sky and covered the sun descended. Moreover, these sword chis were both real and fake, real and illusory at the same time, making it impossible to guard against. Wu Diao hurriedly put away his heavy hammer. He raised his arms and propped up a golden semicircular shield. The endless triple extinction sword chi clanged against the shield, but it only caused the shield to twist a little, but it did not break. Looking carefully, in fact, the sword chi did not actually hit the shield. Instead, they were bounced off before they even made contact. Zhuge Puha held his spirit sword, and once again drew a simple array out of thin air. The stars in the array shone brightly, emitting starlight power that constantly wore down the triple extinction sword chi. The two of them woke up early and had a way to resist, but Xi Feiying and Mu Qinglin did not have it so easy. The two of them only woke up when they were injured by the triple extinction sword chi. Fortunately, they were already prepared to resist the powerful gravity, so they were not seriously injured. As for Di Chuan and Wang Zhu, they had already retreated far away when they saw that the situation was not good. While Wu Diao and the others were busy defending against the thousands upon thousands of triple extinction sword chis, for Leng Shiqi suddenly appeared behind them. The four Leng Shiqi all stabbed out with their swords. Blood blossomed and the murderous aura was ferocious. The 7 swords overlapped and the power was terrifying. The 4 of them had different reactions to Leng Shiqi's sudden attack. Leng Shiqi grunted as the gravity around him increased several times, causing Leng Shiqi's sword light to twist strangely. It was even on the verge of dispersing. Zhuge Puha's expression did not change. He pointed with his left hand, and traces of starlight condensed into an unknown star beast. The star beast shook its head and swung its tail, knocking away the Leng Shiqi's sword chi. Xi Feiying condensed several layers of thick crimson ice crystals around her, and Mu Qinglin threw out a handful of seeds. Those seeds grew into thick trees in the blink of an eye, blocking the Leng Shiqi's attack. These people were not easy to deal with. Although Leng Shiqi temporarily suppressed the 4 of them, it was difficult for him to defeat them. In fact, Leng Shiqi was also having a headache. The gravity here was still affecting him too much. Otherwise, he could have divided into hundreds of phantoms. Of course, if there was no gravity here, his opponents would not be at a disadvantage so easily. However, Leng Shiqi's goal was not to win. He only needed to delay the 4 of them for a while, and wait for the Delta Origi to finish absorbing the power of the ghost shadow. Hence, Leng Shiqi retracted his apparition. A pair of fleshy wings appeared on his back, and he soared into the air. However, he only flew a few feet high. He quickly formed hand seals, and 5 different formations slowly took shape in midair. Zhuge Puha and the other 4 had just barely resisted the tri-extinction sword chi. When they looked up, their expressions turned bitter. Although they did not know what Leng Shiqi was going to do, just seeing Leng Shiqi in an invincible position was enough to give them a headache. The ability to fly was a standard for Sky Origin Realm cultivators. Leng Shiqi looked down at them coldly. The 5 formations were slowly rotating, and countless light spots were constantly condensing. Waves of spiritual energy that made people's hearts palpitate were being emitted. Everyone who was still standing on the stairs was shocked. They all knew that Leng Shiqi was strong, but they never thought he would be this strong. Chapter 474. Leng Shiqi floated in the air. With a wave of his hand, the dense dots of light in the formation behind him became brighter and brighter, making him look like a god. The people below were surprised, but at the same time, they felt bitter in their hearts. Wu Diao could only shout with a gloomy face, "Brother Lu, there is no need to be so serious. We only heard that Brother Lu's strength is outstanding, and wanted to learn a thing or two from you." His words meant that he was admitting defeat. Wu Diao naturally had his own trump cards, but they had only reached the 50th step of the stairway. There were still many unknown dangers ahead. If they used their trump cards now, what would they do in the future? Zhuge thoughts were similar to Wu Diao's, but the shock in his heart was far greater than Wu Diao's. He had fought with Leng Shiqi before. At that time, Leng Shiqi did not use the two moves just now. This made Zhuge feel that Leng Shiqi was simply unfathomable. Zhuge also stopped. Leng Shiqi saw this and felt a little relieved. He had achieved his goal. He changed the seal in his hand and the various colored dots of light gradually dimmed. However, he did not withdraw the ice and fire-flowing light array. Instead, he continued to let the 5 arrays slowly rotate to deter everyone. Seeing that Leng Shiqi did not continue, everyone let out a sigh of relief. The pressure and shock that Leng Shiqi gave them just now was too great. Especially Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin. They still could not believe that the middle stage of the spirit aperture realm could be so strong. Di Chuan also had a look of surprise. After all, he was not present when Leng Shiqi killed Jiwen. No matter how strong Leng Shiqi was from others, it was not as good as seeing it with his own eyes. Di Chuan was a little scared. He believed that his strength was at most a little weaker than Zhuge. But Leng Shiqi could easily suppress 4 late-stage spirit aperture realm experts. If it was a one-on-one fight, who could be his opponent? Of course, Di Chuan was also a little relieved. He was glad that he stood on Leng Shiqi's side. As long as he held on to this thigh, he might be able to pass this test. Since the main battlefield had stopped fighting, Di Chuan did not continue fighting with Wang Zhu. Both sides stopped. Leng Shiqi continued to float in the air and looked towards the Delta Origi. Without any disturbance, the Delta Origi's process seemed to be going smoothly. Through the Byakugan, he could see that the Delta Origi's cultivation was still rapidly rising. At this moment, it had reached the same level as Leng, the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. However, Leng Shiqi was not very happy, because he knew that this kind of rapid increase in spiritual energy was too heterogeneous. It could easily lead to an unstable foundation and ruin one's future path of cultivation. Seeing that the Delta Origi's cultivation was still increasing, Leng Shiqi's eyes could not help but show some worry. Just as the Delta Origi broke through to the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, the ghost fire around her suddenly shrunk. The ghost fire was completely retracted into the Delta Origi's body, and everyone finally saw the appearance of the Delta Origi. At this moment, the Delta Origi's originally black hair had turned gray. The Delta Origi slowly opened her eyes. What was even more strange was that her eyes were completely empty. There was no distinction between the white of her eyes and the pupils. Her eyes were completely gray. Leng Shiqi immediately frowned. There was indeed a problem with the method of using external forces to increase one's cultivation. The Delta Origi expressionlessly glanced at everyone. In the next moment, a sinister blood-red color suddenly flashed in her eyes. She screamed, and immediately, dozens of blood-red ghosts of various shapes swarmed out from her body and madly pounced on everyone. Every single one of these blood-red ghosts actually had the terrifying strength of someone who had just entered the spirit aperture realm. Fortunately, these blood-red ghosts did not have any intelligence. The few of them hurriedly used various methods to defeat most of them. However, behind the Delta Origi, there was a skeleton phantom that was dozens of feet tall and covered in bits of flesh. The skeleton phantom raised its head to look at the sky and raised its arms high, as if it was sincerely praying. Everyone also raised their heads to look, but they were shocked to see that there was a blood moon in the sky. A bloody, gloomy, and terrifying aura spread out, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed with a green light. He discovered that the spiritual energy in the Delta Origi's body was extremely unstable. This was probably because she had devoured too many ghosts, and some dark emotions had affected her mind, causing her to become so crazy. To put it simply, she was possessed by the devil. Looking at the skeleton and the blood moon in the sky, Leng Shiqi was also very dignified. Facing this blood moon, he actually felt like he was facing a spirit astral realm expert. Delta Origi, who was only at the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm, actually had such strength. However, Lung Shiqi thought that this blood moon should be Delta Origi's strongest trump card. It must be the kind of ultimate move that could not be used easily. Therefore, whether it was to protect himself or to let the Delta Origi conserve their strength, he had to stop the Delta Origi. The green light in Lung Shiqi's eyes instantly turned into a 5-colored stream of light, and an invisible spiritual energy crazily surged out. 5 God Spirit Intimidation Technique. Lung Shiqi directly invaded the Delta Origi's spiritual world. The Delta Origi was now in a state of chi deviation, so he easily broke in. In the Delta Origi's spiritual world, there was scarlet blood everywhere. On the ground, there were bones after bones. In the air, there were countless ghosts flying around, and above the dome, there was a huge blood moon. It could be said that the Delta Origi's spiritual world was a mess. If this continued, it would not be far from collapse. However, he could not find the Delta Origi's spiritual consciousness. However, there was no time for him to slowly search. The blood moon in the outside world could fall at any time. At that time, the Delta Origi would definitely overdraw their spiritual energy, and coupled with chi deviation, the consequences would be unimaginable. With a thought, Lung Shiqi transformed into 5 giants that were about 100 feet tall. With a raise of his hand, he crushed a large number of ghosts. The phantoms immediately rushed over in groups. There were too many phantoms. It was as if there was no end to them. Even the 5 Lung 17's feet were piled up with phantoms' corpses. Some of them were even useless. Lung Shiqi knew that he could not continue like this. At the same time he used the 5 God Spirit Intimidation Technique, he also used falling flowers. Gorgeous flowers suddenly appeared. Those flowers did not attack the ghosts, but floated around in the spiritual world. Lung Shiqi wanted to use this method to find the Delta Origi's spiritual consciousness first. As long as he could awaken the Delta Origi's spiritual consciousness, it would be half the battle. Not long after, Lung Shiqi indeed sensed the Delta Origi's aura at the edge of the spiritual world. Found it. It hit so well. However, when Lung Shiqi arrived and was about to awaken the Delta Origi, the entire spiritual world suddenly trembled. Chapter 475. The violent tremors even caused Lung Shiqi's 5 phantoms to show signs of collapsing. He said in shock, "Not good, is this place going to collapse?" At this moment, the blood moon hanging high in the sky suddenly bloomed with a boundless blood-red brilliance. Wherever the brilliance touched, all the ghostly figures were completely vaporized. Not only the phantoms, but the flowers and Lung Shiqi's phantoms were also evaporated. Lung Shiqi saw this scene and chuckled. It seems that Delta Origi's consciousness has awakened on its own, and is subconsciously clearing out the other worldlings in its spiritual world. That saved me some effort. Then he removed the 5 God Soul Intimidation Technique. In the outside world, Delta Origi's originally empty eyes gradually regained their spirit. The gray and blood-red light in her eyes also slowly faded away, along with the blood moon that she summoned. Delta Origi's eyes finally regained their clarity. She first looked around with some confusion, then her gaze kept changing. Finally, her gaze fell on Lung Shiqi. Lung Shiqi also removed the ice and fire-flowing light formation, and the Gu King's spirit armor, and landed on the ground. He had a lot of questions about Delta Origi, but now wasn't a good time to discuss them. Lung Shiqi stood together with Delta Origi and Di Chuan, which gave the other 2 great pressure. Especially the blood moon that Delta Origi used, it wasn't much weaker than Lung Shiqi's. Together with Di Chuan, who was at the 9th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, and had a 6th level Spirit Sword, who could be their opponent? Wu Diao and Jugapuha secretly exchanged glances, and saw the intention of forming an alliance in each other's eyes. Jugapuha looked at Delta Origi and asked with a smile, "How did Lady Bloodmoon come here directly? Please enlighten me." His question was also a question that everyone, including Lung Shiqi, wanted to know. After all, they entered the stairway to heaven together, but before that, Delta Origi was already here. Perhaps Delta Origi knew some secrets about the stairway to heaven. Delta Origi still had a cold expression, and didn't say anything. Jugapuha's smile slightly stiffened. At this time, Delta Origi finally spoke, I don't know. In my impression, this place was originally a ruined palace. The color was the same as this stairway. When I was exploring the palace, I accidentally triggered some traps or formations, and was surrounded by a large group of ghosts. When I woke up, I was already in this state. Her answer clearly didn't satisfy the others. She didn't know what she said. Of her, of course, to the point, it was as if she didn't say anything. However, if she didn't want to say anything, no one could force her. They could only continue to move forward with many questions. When Gu-san and Lung Shiqi passed each other, Gu-san secretly handed over a jade slip to Lung Shiqi, who took the hint and put it away. When everyone reached the 52nd step, the gravity on their bodies didn't become stronger. This was good news, but there was also bad news. The air was filled with a blazing hot aura. Fortunately, this aura wasn't very strong. It was directly blocked by their protective spiritual armor, but this wasn't a good sign. From the moment they entered the stairway to heaven, the gravity gradually became stronger. This made them realize that the higher they went, the hotter it would become. What made everyone feel a little strange was that no monsters appeared on the 52nd step. At this time, Delta Orgi explained. The monsters on the stairs nearby are those ghosts. They are all dead now. Her short sentence made everyone speechless. They also recalled the scene of hundreds of ghosts howling from before. At the same time, they became more and more afraid of Delta Orgi. Surrounded by hundreds of ghosts, not only did she kill them all, but she also took the opportunity to improve her cultivation. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. However, when everyone thought about it, without the monsters blocking the way, their progress would only be smoother. It wasn't bad. Only Lung Shiqi was still thinking about the soul stone. He also felt a little strange. There were so many ghosts, but they didn't drop any soul stones. He thought about how Delta Orgi absorbed the power of the ghosts to improve her cultivation. It was possible that she had also absorbed the soul stone. Without the monsters blocking them, everyone moved very quickly. Lung Shiqi originally cultivated cold energy. He constantly released waves of cold energy to wrap the three of them. Shi Feiying's strange crimson ice crystal was also a variant of the ice element. It was also very useful for resisting the omnipresent blazing aura. Wang Zhu cultivated a water element cultivation method, so she could handle it with ease. Thus, everyone quickly arrived at the 101st step. Standing here, everyone looked around with unusual vigilance. From their previous experience, they were afraid that there would be new changes from here onwards. Sure enough, 4 golden-armored warriors appeared on the stairs, each over 10 feet tall. Without saying a word, they attacked. Every golden-armored warrior had the terrifying strength of the 4th layer of the spirit aperture realm. At the same time, there seemed to be something strange in the air. Every time they breathed, they would feel a piercing pain in their body, as if they were being pricked by sharp needles. These are the monsters that appeared in the metal area. Wu Diao shouted. He had first appeared in the metal area, so he was very familiar with these golden-armored warriors. The strength of this golden-armored warrior was already a threat to them. In terms of cultivation, none of the people present were weak. But don't forget that they had to endure dozens of times the gravity, the intense heat, and the pain of being pricked by needles. Their strength had been greatly restricted. Just relying on the strength of a single group to deal with these 4 golden-armored warriors was already quite troublesome. Thus, this time, everyone decided to attack together without any discussion. The 8 middle and late-stage spirit aperture realm cultivators did not hesitate and attacked at the same time. Every one of them knew that there was still a long way to go before they reached the top of the stairway. Now was not the time for them to kill each other. With the 8 of them working together, it did not take long for the golden-armored warriors to be torn into pieces. As for the dropped soul stones, they were equally divided. However, no one was happy at all. According to the rules of the stairway, these 4 golden-armored warriors were definitely the weakest. Thus, the opponents they would face next would definitely be stronger and stronger. Sure enough, at the 102nd step, the number of golden-armored warriors increased to 5. With every step, the number of golden armored warriors would increase by 1. When it reached 10, the number of golden armored warriors decreased back to 4. However, the golden armored warriors were now comparable to the 5th layer of the spirit aperture realm. If this continued, wouldn't the golden armored warriors be as strong as the late stage of the spirit aperture realm when they reached the 140 to 150 level? The danger was not only limited to the golden armored warriors. There were also more and more invisible needles hidden in the air. Even the protective armor could not completely block them. Everyone was enduring endless pain at every moment. How should they fight? Chapter 476. But even so, no one chose to back down. They were all clear that if they wanted to pass the test and have a meteoric rise, they had to face the difficulties head-on. At this time, the 8 of them temporarily gave up on the idea of fighting among themselves, and chose to work together to face the enemy. Just like that, they arrived at the 150th step with great difficulty. With a wung sound, a golden light flashed and 10 huge golden armored warriors appeared with different weapons. These golden armored warriors all had the strength of the 7th level of the spirit aperture realm. However, the 8 of them, including Lung Shiqi, were already panting. After a series of battles, they had consumed a lot of their spiritual energy, but they couldn't stop to rest because even if they didn't fight, they still had to resist the gravity, fire, and invisible golden needles, so they could only end the battle quickly. Lung Shiqi swallowed a pill to recover his spiritual energy, but even so, his face was still slightly pale. Delta Origi was the same. The disadvantages of him and Delta Origi were also revealed. Even though they were all very strong, Lung Shiqi could even be said to be the strongest among them, but he was still at the 5th level of the spirit aperture realm. In terms of strength, he didn't lose to anyone, but the total amount of spiritual energy he had was still far from the late stage of the spirit aperture realm. Such a long battle made Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi the first to be unable to bear it. Their situation naturally fell into the eyes of the others. Wu Diao and Jugapuha were secretly happy. Of course, facing the 10 golden armored warriors in front of them who were comparable to the 7th level of the spirit aperture realm, they couldn't be happy too early. Up until now, they had already killed many golden armored warriors, so they knew their weaknesses. Soon after, Gu Sen took a step forward. Strange willow. The wisps ignited, instantly enveloping all the golden armored warriors. Fire was the bane of metal. Among the people present, only Gu San had cultivated fire elemental spiritual techniques. Although her cultivation was not as high as the golden armored warriors, her willow. The wisps were also extraordinary. Thus, she was the first to strike and restrain the golden armored warrior. Lung Shiqi raised his arms, and hundreds of cold threads floated out, wrapping around all the golden armored warriors like tentacles. The cold threads seemed very weak, but they were able to bind them tightly. Furthermore, there was a terrifying cold underworld force that was constantly corroding the golden armored warriors' bodies. This was the netherworld Thousand Silk Hands. The Delta Origi and Lung Shiqi greatly suppressed the movements of the golden armored warriors. Then they immediately attacked in groups of 2 or 3. The 7 stars on Jugapuha's spirit sword shone brightly, and every stab of the sword could easily leave a hole on the golden armored warrior's body. Wu Diao swung his heavy hammer. It was as if the heavy hammer was weightless in his hand. He fought the golden armored warrior in close combat with the power of earth. Di Chuan was able to use 2 different spiritual techniques with his dual swords. His approach was similar to Lung Shiqi's swordsmanship. They both focused on controlling blood energy and killing intent. The difference was that Di Chuan's swordsmanship was very flexible. He was fighting 2 golden armored warriors alone, and still had the upper hand. The others also used their own methods. Overall, they still had the upper hand. However, everyone's spiritual power was already greatly depleted. It was obviously very difficult to eliminate the golden armored warriors in a short period of time. This would probably be a long battle. However, in this way, the Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi would only be at a greater disadvantage. Even if they defeated all the golden armored warriors, they would not be able to use much of their combat power. Therefore, this battle must end as soon as possible. Lung Shiqi's mind moved, and the demon advent battle blade appeared in his hand. The moment the battle blade appeared, it trembled excitedly, as if it was very eager to fight. It could be seen that the demon advent battle blade's spirituality was higher. Lung Shiqi held the demon advent battle blade tightly, and then a terrifying demonic aura soared into the sky. Dense demonic patterns climbed onto the blade, and the demon advent battle blade immediately buzzed excitedly. When the others saw that Lung Shiqi was about to make a big move, they all had different expressions. A strange expression quickly flashed across Zhuge-Puha's face. This was because he had been defeated by Lung Shiqi's sword earlier. As for the others, they were all staring at the demon advent battle blade in Lung Shiqi's hand in surprise. That sword seemed to have a high spirituality, and it was very likely to be a rank 7 artifact. This was a treasure that they could only dream of. Lung Shiqi was still concentrating on compressing the demonic aura in his body. The originally scattered demonic aura also began to shrink back, and all of it went into the demon advent battle blade. At this moment, even Lung Shiqi's eyes were completely filled with pure demonic aura. Slash! A low roar sounded, and a shocking sword intent suddenly appeared. A faint shadow of a demon god appeared, and the demon god raised its hand and slashed out. A pitch-black sword light flashed, and the gray fog that was everywhere in the sky was suddenly swept away. 3 large golden heads rolled on the ground, and even the stairway to heaven shook a few times. The sword light only flashed for a moment, but the suffocating power caused the corners of everyone's eyes to twitch violently. Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum. This was the true Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum. Previously, when Lung Shiqi fought with Zhuge-Puha, Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum was just a sword technique that he had created on the spur of the moment. It could be said that it was only in its embryonic form. Now that Lung Shiqi had condensed a primordial spirit, he had integrated his primordial spirit's will into the sword technique. Somehow, it had actually caused the demon god's shadow to appear, and even he himself was a little surprised. If Lung Shiqi himself was a little surprised, then the others could be said to be extremely shocked. Previously, when Lung Shiqi suppressed 4 Spirit Aperture Realm late-stage cultivators by himself, he had also shown his powerful strength. However, at that time, no one had used their full strength, so they were only afraid of Lung Shiqi. But now, everyone's spiritual power had been used up by more than half, and Lung Shiqi was still able to use such a terrifying sword technique, killing 3 golden armored warriors with a single strike. Everyone present had their own powerful trump cards, but they were very clear that even if they used their trump cards, they would not be able to kill 3 golden armored warriors with extremely strong defense at the same time. In comparison, they were not only afraid of Lung Shiqi, they were even more terrified. Among these people, the one who was the most shocked was Zhuge-Puha. He had once lost to the Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum sword technique, but he was confident that if he used his strongest spiritual technique, he would definitely be able to turn the tables. However, after seeing the Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum, the confidence in the bottom of his heart was completely destroyed. He had a complicated look in his eyes as he thought to himself. So when he fought with me, he did not use his full strength at all. If it was me facing that sword, would I really be able to block it? The Demon Ephemeral Epiphyllum made everyone's fear of Lung Shiqi rise to an unprecedented level. Chapter 477. Some people were afraid, while others were happy. Di Chuan was the happiest person. The stronger Lung Shiqi was, the higher his chances of passing the test. What's more, Lung Shiqi had pulled all the aggro to him, so no one cared about Di Chuan anymore. If no one paid attention, of course he wouldn't be targeted, and he was happy. As for Delta Origi, she looked deeply at Lung Shiqi, and stubbornness flashed in the depths of her eyes. Lung Shiqi killed 3 golden armored warriors with 1 slash, shocking everyone, but he didn't have it easy either. At this moment, he only had about 30% of his spiritual power left, and all of his demonic energy was used up, which meant that he couldn't use demonic energy for a while. He directly took 3 pills to recover his spiritual power, and after that he didn't do much, only using the cold underworld 1,000 silk hands to restrict the golden armored warriors. With 3 golden armored warriors gone, the pressure on the others was greatly reduced. Except for Lung Shiqi, everyone was dealing with a golden armored warrior alone. The golden armored warriors weren't weak, and their defense was strong, but after all, they weren't intelligent enough. How could they be a match for these battle-hardened young elites in a one-on-one fight? In less than a quarter of an hour, all of the golden armored warriors were killed. Everyone quickly divided the dropped soul stones, and then didn't dare to stop at all, and stepped onto the 151st step. They were already 2/3 of the way up the stairway, and if nothing unexpected happened, there would be additional restrictions on the stairway. So far, only the cold air in the water area and the spiritual power in the wood area hadn't leaked out, so it would definitely be one of these two next. After the 8 people stood still, they were vigilant and carefully sensing for any changes. The blazing aura that originally wrapped around them suddenly disappeared and turned into a bone-piercing cold air. Fortunately, everyone was already vigilant and didn't panic too much. Lung Shiqi withdrew the cold air and drew a circle in front of him with his finger. Suddenly, a circle of fire appeared, surrounding him, Delta Origi, and Dichuan to resist the cold air. However, what caught everyone off guard was that the cold air suddenly disappeared, and then waves of fire rushed towards them. This sudden change really made everyone a little flustered. The power of ice and fire here actually alternated with each other without any pattern, making it impossible to guard against. To make matters worse, 2 huge ice giants jumped out from the gray fog. The aura emitted by these monsters was also at the 7th layer of the spirit aperture realm. The wave of fire did not seem to have any effect on the ice giants. What was more troublesome was that these 2 monsters were obviously more intelligent than the golden armored warriors. They directly chose to pounce on the Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi, who had the lowest cultivation. "You're courting death." Delta Origi's evil aura surged. She gently twirled the bone sword in her hand, and a raging ghost fire ignited on the blade. With a thrust of the sword, dozens of ghost fire sword beams formed a sword net, instantly injuring the ice crystal giant that was pouncing towards her. Lung Shiqi was much simpler. He directly summoned the Goo King to fight with the ice crystal giant, while he waited for an opportunity to move. He turned to the others and said, "What, you guys want to stand by and watch?" Zhuge Puha really wanted Lung Shiqi to die here, but it was obviously not the time for them to fight. He hesitated for a moment, but still stepped in to help. At this time, Wu Diao seemed to have come back to his senses. He brought Wang Zhu and Mu Qinglin to join the battle. With the 8 people attacking together, it was naturally easy to deal with the 2 ice crystal giants at the 7th layer of the spirit aperture realm, but the atmosphere was unusually heavy. This was only the first wave, and there were already monsters at the 7th layer of the spirit aperture realm. How strong would the monsters be in the end? Could there be monsters at the spirit astral realm? Even if there was no spirit astral realm, a group of monsters at the 9th layer of the spirit aperture realm was not something they could deal with. In addition, the power of ice and fire outside without any pattern made them very uncomfortable. Coupled with the gravity and invisible golden needles, it would be good if they could use half of their strength. At this moment, even some people's confidence began to waver. Could they really reach the top? Lung Shiqi didn't have the time to think about it. He only knew that the more time he wasted here, the less hope he had of getting out. Therefore, he resolutely walked to the next step. Delta Origi and Dichuan followed closely behind. 3 ice crystal giants appeared, and another battle began. Battle, battle, battle. There was no adjustment, no rest, only battle after battle awaited them. The ice crystal giants were getting stronger and stronger. Everyone was forced to use some of their trump cards. For example, at the 162nd step, Mu Qinglin summoned a huge ancient tree that was 10 feet tall, and directly threw several ice crystal giants down the stairs. Wu Diao was inspired, and also used the anti-gravity that he had been hiding for a long time, and sent a group of monsters flying. Although they couldn't get soul stones like this, compared to reaching the top, the soul stones were nothing. Dichuan used some kind of secret technique to control a doppelganger. That doppelganger wasn't a simple illusion technique, but an existence that was similar to a physical body. His main body and doppelganger each wielded a sword, and used completely different sword techniques. Miraculously, when these two sword techniques were used together, they were able to erupt with extremely powerful battle strength. He killed several ice crystal giants that were comparable to Spirit Aperture Realm 8th layer cultivators by himself. In fact, ever since he entered the Sky Stairway, although Di Chuan's cultivation was very high, he didn't have a strong presence. His limelight was almost completely stolen by Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi. He suddenly erupted with such powerful strength, which made people look at him in a new light. As for Wang Zhu and Shi Feiying, who weren't very strong and didn't have powerful secret techniques, the two of them had to bear the pain and use their trump cards. Wang Zhu used a palm-sized purple compass. The compass could release dense lightning, and its power was boundless. Shi Feiying, on the other hand, used a blood-red crystal. The crystal rapidly grew in size and was filled with a strange power of extreme frost. It actually froze the monster, which was originally made of ice crystals, into ice. In order to conserve spirit energy, Lung Shiqi also used a few consumables. These were all obtained from the resources of the Extreme Fire Manor and the Bipolar Mountain Stronghold, so he didn't feel any heartache when using them. This was a battle that seemed to be endless. Gradually, everyone's consciousness became a bit blurry. They only knew that they had to fight blindly. When they reached the 200th step, their spirit energy had almost reached the bottom. Even their protective spirit armors couldn't be maintained. Although they still had pills, the continuous use of pills had greatly reduced the effects of the pills. Their spirit energy still couldn't make up for their consumption. At the same time, whether it was the power of gravity, ice or fire, they were all constantly destroying their bodies. At this moment, everyone was carrying injuries of various sizes. Only Lung Shiqi's body wasn't weak, so his situation was slightly better. However, at this moment, 10 huge ice crystal giants appeared. These monsters all had terrifying auras comparable to Spirit Aperture Realm 9th layer cultivators. Chapter 478. The 10 powerful ice crystal giants glared at everyone. There was even a hint of mockery in their eyes. It was obvious that their intelligence was close to that of a normal person. Ka ka ka. The ice crystal giants roared towards the sky and let out a strange ear-piercing roar. Soon after, a visible wave of cold air swept over. Lung Shiqi's left hand drew a flame with the fire symbol technique, while his right hand shot out Xiaoyang sword chi with the sword. Only then was he able to block the cold wave. Delta Origi had the ghost fire protecting their bodies, and Di Chuan was in a good state. They could all block it. However, there was someone who couldn't block it. That person was Wang Zhu. Wang Zhu was at the 7th level of the Spirit Aperture Realm, but his strength was inferior to Lung Shiqi and Delta Origi, so he could be considered the weakest person here. At this moment, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The spirit armor on his body was shaking and could shatter at any moment. Once the spirit armor disappeared, the ice crystal giants wouldn't even need to do anything. Just the strange things in the outside world were enough to take his life. Facing the cold wave, he knew that he was doomed. He looked hopefully at Wu Diao, hoping that Wu Diao could save him. However, Wu Diao could only protect himself. How could he care about him? Wu Diao directly chose to ignore him. Wang Zhu's face was filled with despair. He was already beginning to regret. If he had known earlier, he would have gone back the way he came like Buyangqiu. At least he would have had a chance to live. But now, even if he wanted to go down, it was too late. The cold wave attacked, and the little bit of protective spirit armor he had left was finally completely shattered. Without the protection of the spirit armor, the gravity that was dozens of times stronger instantly crushed Wang Zhu to the ground. The chi of ice and fire and the invisible golden needles destroyed his body without any resistance. In the blink of an eye, his aura was extremely weak. He was like a candle flickering in the wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. The sad thing was that the other 7 people didn't even look at him, because the 10 ice crystal giants had already charged over. Lung Shiqi raised his hands to the sky. Suddenly, a glaring sun of poisonous flames appeared. The burning air seemed to distort a little. The shining sun poisonous yang palm brazenly smashed towards the charging ice giant. Boom! The golden poisonous flames wreaked havoc, accompanied by the ice crystal giant's ear-piercing roar. Lung Shiqi's shining sun-poisonous yang palm blasted off half of the ice giant's body. However, the ice giant didn't seem to feel any pain. It continued to drag its heavy body forward. Lung Shiqi took a deep breath. If he was at his peak, this would not be the only result. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only wield the inky jade sword and unleash a mighty swordlight to fight with the ice crystal giant. As the saying goes, misfortunes never come singly. There were 10 ice crystal giants in the field, but only 7 people. Therefore, there was bound to be someone who had to deal with more than one ice crystal giant at the same time. Just as Lung Shiqi was engaged in a fierce battle, another ice crystal giant actually found him. Lung Shiqi cursed his bad luck. In his current state, he could barely gain the upper hand in a one-on-one fight. However, if it was 1 against 2, he could only passively take a beating. More importantly, his strongest explosive spiritual technique, ephemeral flash, could not be used. A large part of the reason why ephemeral flash was so strong was that it could invisibly attack the mind. However, the ice crystal giants clearly did not have complete intelligence, so this technique had little effect on them. As for ephemeral flash, he had already used it once before. The demonic aura in his body was almost exhausted, so he could not use it anymore. Even lust for the eyes was also an illusion, so it was useless against the ice crystal giants. Seeing the other ice crystal giant charging over, Lung Shiqi could only stretch out his 5 fingers. 5 blood-red lightning bolts shot out, carrying a rich blood and thunder power. They all shot into the ice crystal giant's right leg. Puff puff puff. The ice crystal giant's right leg was directly penetrated with 5 transparent holes, which suddenly made its body stop. At the same time, the ice crystal giant with only half of its body left had already arrived in front of Lung Shiqi. A dark golden brilliance suddenly erupted, and a palm print as heavy as 10,000 kilograms appeared, fiercely colliding with the ice crystal giant. A terrifying wave of air came out from the place where the two collided, and the floor tiles on the stairs were all shattered and sent flying out. Their fight was very loud, but the others did not pay attention to it. Everyone had to concentrate on the battle. If they were distracted, they would die. This was the first time Lung Shiqi had taken the attack of the ice crystal giant head-on. The strength of this monster was 2 points higher than he had imagined. In terms of strength alone, it was probably comparable to a spirit cultivator, who had just entered the gang spirit realm. The Supreme Yang secret palm print was a spiritual technique with both offensive and defensive capabilities, but it was still broken by the ice crystal giant's punch. However, the ice crystal giant was not in a good condition either. Its entire right arm was broken, and now its upper body was only left with its head. The threat was finally greatly reduced. Lung Shiqi used 2 spiritual techniques in succession, and most of his remaining spiritual power was taken away. Looking at another ice crystal giant rushing over, Lung Shiqi had no choice but to take out a piece of finger bone. This finger bone was neither human nor beast. It was the thing that Dichuan took out when he traded the crystallization pill with him. Dichuan had also studied the finger bone for a period of time, but he had no clue. After this thing was in Lung Shiqi's hands, he found some clues. The evil aura on the finger bone was very similar to the aura of the evil old man he met in Translation City. He had also cultivated the old man's spiritual technique, Evil Sky Morning Mantra, and could also use a trace of evil aura. So Lung Shiqi accidentally found that this finger bone contained an extremely powerful evil spirit. If he could draw it out, it would definitely be comparable to the full blow of a master of gang spirit realm. Lung Shiqi quickly glanced at the others. In addition to him, Wu Diao was also fighting with 2 ice crystal giants at the same time and had been injured. The other 5 people were also not in a good condition. Delta Origi's fighting power was not weak, but her cultivation was not very stable. She could not use her spiritual power very smoothly during the battle, so she could only defend herself at the moment. Dichuan's situation was a little better, but they were only evenly matched. As for the rest, except for Zhuge Pu who had a slight advantage, Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin were even seriously injured and dying. If it went on like this, it would not be long before people died. For Lung Shiqi, as long as Delta Origi was fine, the others could die. But if someone died, who would deal with the extra ice crystal giants. At that time, they would only die faster. So Lung Shiqi no longer hesitated. He mobilized the weak evil spirit in his body and poured it into the finger bone. In an instant, the evil spirit rose and whistled in the air, condensing into a strange shadow. The shadow only had the upper body, with a beast head and a human body. It had 6 arms, each of which was different. The mysterious shadow's hollow eyes turned gently twice, and then the 6 arms waved together, stirring up the heaven and earth, and fell down with a strange evil spirit. Chapter 479. Everyone get out of the way. Lung Shiqi roared and retreated to the edge of the stairs using the ghost steps. The others felt a chill down their spines when they saw the evil Qi. At first, they didn't dare to be distracted, but when they heard Lung Shiqi's voice, they all ran away as fast as they could. In the blink of an eye, the 6 arms of the evil Qi shadow were like 6 pillars supporting the sky, carrying the power to shake the earth and shatter the void. The terrifying power directly shattered the stairs. Some of the ice giants were instantly shattered into powder, and some fell down. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Everyone was stunned. Even Lung Shiqi was the same. Even he didn't expect the power in the finger bone to be so powerful. Those ice giants comparable to the 9th level of the spirit aperture realm were like toys that could be destroyed at will. However, what caused Lung Shiqi's heart to race was that the evil energy phantom hadn't disappeared yet. It actually lowered its head to look at Lung Shiqi, and its originally empty eyes actually revealed a trace of killing intent. Lung Shiqi's heart suddenly jumped to his throat. His spiritual power was almost exhausted. If the evil Qi shadow attacked him, he would definitely die. Fortunately, the evil Qi shadow suddenly disappeared. Perhaps the power in the finger bone had been exhausted, but the look in its eyes still made Lung Shiqi's heart palpitate. He thought of the second time he caught the evil old man's remnant soul. The remnant soul had threatened him, saying that if he was found by his original body, he would suffer a fate worse than death. Could it be that the mysterious shadow just now was the original body of the remnant soul? However, now was not the time for him to be distracted and think too much, because everyone else was looking at him with a strange expression. Everyone could reach this level, who didn't have something to protect themselves. But almost everyone had used their treasures, but the power of the mysterious shadow released by Lung Shiqi was far beyond the power of a spirit cultivator, who had just entered the spirit astral realm. Did he still have such a terrible trump card? At the same time, they were secretly glad that Lung Shiqi had already used this trump card. Otherwise, if this thing was used on them, none of them would have survived. Even though Lung Shiqi had given them too many surprises, they still found it unbelievable. Could it be that Lung Shiqi still had other trump cards? No one could say for sure. If it was said that they were afraid of Lung Shiqi at the beginning, now the Lung Shiqi gave them a feeling of invincibility. Only Delta Orgi remained calm. She knew Lung Shiqi the best, and knew that he must have some trump cards up his sleeve. Lung Shiqi didn't care about other people's gazes, nor did he care about what they were thinking. He looked around, and then his face fell. Wang Zhu had already disappeared. He didn't know if she had died in the hands of the evil shadow or if she had fallen down. No matter which one it was, Wang Zhu was already on the verge of death. She must have fallen by now. What Lung Shiqi cared about was the soul stones on Wang Zhu's body. If Wang Zhu could come to the stairway, it meant that she must have some soul stones. Besides, along the way, he had received a lot of soul stones. A conservative estimate was at least 20 to 30 pounds. It was gone just like that. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Although it was a pity, they still had to continue walking. Then, the 7 of them went around the edge of the stairway, and finally stepped onto the 201st step. Although everyone was already riddled with injuries and gasping for breath, they immediately made preparations to continue fighting once they reached this level. Especially since everyone knew that from here onwards, there would definitely be new restrictions and new monsters. However, after a full 10 breaths, everything was still calm as usual. Nothing unexpected happened. This made everyone puzzled. Only Lung Shiqi and Delta Orgi knew what was going on. Since entering the stairway, The characteristics of the earth, fire, metal, and water areas had appeared. Only the wood area hadn't. So from here onwards, their spiritual power would begin to slowly drain away. However, the speed of the loss of spiritual power was still very slow. If they didn't pay too much attention, they wouldn't feel anything. Leng Shiqi sighed secretly. This situation was simply one disaster after another for them who already had little spiritual power left. Especially Delta Origi, her cultivation was not very stable. If she stayed here for a long time, it was possible that her realm would directly fall. Among the people present, only Leng Shiqi and Delta Origi had stayed in the wood area before. The others were still wondering why nothing strange had appeared. Leng Shiqi said, "If I'm not wrong, this corresponds to the wood area. Our spiritual power will involuntarily leak and lose. It will be lost forever. It may be difficult for you to understand now, but the higher we go, the faster the loss of spiritual power will definitely be." The reason why he said this was mainly because of what Di Chuan said. Moreover, as long as they continued, everyone would notice it sooner or later. There was no need to hide it. Zhuge Puha immediately closed his eyes and carefully checked his spiritual power. After a few breaths, he suddenly opened his eyes and said, "It's true. My spiritual power is indeed disappearing, but the speed is very slow. If you don't look carefully, you won't notice it at all." Wu Diao also felt it. His face suddenly became very bitter. Big loss, big loss. His cultivation was already at the peak of the spirit aperture realm. After completing the first round of the task, he also chose the crystallization pill. As long as he left here, he could retreat to break through to the gang spirit realm. He looked at the sky. If he wanted to reach the top of the stairway, there were at least dozens of stairs. Obviously, it couldn't be climbed in a short time. He didn't know how much spiritual power he would lose. This also meant that the time for him to break through to the gang spirit realm would be greatly delayed. Not only Wu Diao, no one was willing to let their cultivation regress. Now they wanted to leave the small 5 elements chaos cave as soon as possible. "Hey, we've been here for a while. Why haven't there been any monsters?" Shi Feiying asked curiously. Her question was also what the others were thinking. Everyone looked at Leng Shiqi at the same time. Leng Shiqi didn't hide anything and briefly explained the situation in the wood area. Shi Feiying's face lit up and said, "That is to say, there may be no monsters on the next dozens of stairs? That's much easier. Even if we lose part of our spiritual power, it's better than dying in the mouths of monsters." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi couldn't help but ponder. In the wood area, there were indeed no monsters, but there seemed to be a trap formation there, which made it difficult for people to walk out of the wood area. But now they were all on the stairway. As long as they went up, the trap formation didn't have much effect. If this was the case, the next dozens of stairs should be the easiest. But would it really be so simple? Chapter 480. It's easy for you to say, but how could it be so easy for us? Wu Diao immediately refuted Shi Feiying. He couldn't accept the fact that his cultivation had fallen, and his temper had become irritable. Shi Feiying snorted and was about to speak, but was stopped by Zhuge Puha. "We'll know what's going on after we go up. Why waste your breath here? You'll only be wasting your spiritual energy. Big brother Zhuge is the wisest." Shi Feiying didn't forget to compliment him. Leng Shiqi secretly nodded at Delta Origi and Di Chuan, then continued forward. 1 level, 2 levels. The group didn't encounter any monsters when they reached the 230th level, but the spiritual energy in their bodies was being drained faster and faster. In addition, they could faintly see the end of the stairway. Everyone used the last of their spiritual energy and went up as fast as they could. However, Delta Origi, who was beside Leng Shiqi, paused for a moment. Then her aura sank, and her cultivation fell from the 6th level of the spirit aperture realm to the 5th level. The others saw this and worked even harder. No one was willing to fall in cultivation. The fall in cultivation made Delta Origi's body even weaker. Leng Shiqi was about to support her, but Delta Origi suddenly glared at him. Leng Shiqi smiled bitterly. She's still so eager to be strong. However, he saw that Delta Origi wasn't slow, so he didn't force her. He maintained the same speed as Delta Origi. Soon, the 7 of them finally reached the last level of the stairway. The process was very smooth, so smooth that it made them feel like they were in a dream. The last level was larger than the previous one, and there were 5 doors of light shining with different colors at the edge. Seeing these doors of light, everyone's eyes lit up. This should be the exit. Seeing the exit in front of them, some people couldn't help but become excited. As long as they could leave here, regardless of whether they could pass the test or not, they could at least save their lives. Lung Shiqi activated his Byakugan and stared at the 5 light doors. Then his expression suddenly tensed up. He quickly signaled Delta Origi and Dichuan to quietly take a few steps back. The other 4 people's attention was attracted by the light door, so they didn't notice their actions. All of a sudden, the 5 doors of light emitted different rays of light, and 5 incomparably thick pillars of light soared into the sky. The 5 pillars of light converged in the sky, but strangely enough, they did not show any colors when they intersected. Instead, they reinforced and restrained each other, evolving into a large mass of gray light. Just as they were wondering what was going on, the gray ball of light suddenly shrunk and expanded, and a huge black sphere appeared from within. The moment the black ball appeared, an invisible force was emitted. That force was invisible and untouchable, but it felt like a mountain was pressing down on them. Everyone was forced to retreat. Even Mu Qinglin was bleeding from the corner of her mouth. Fortunately, Lung Shiqi and the other 2 had retreated in advance, so the pressure on them was slightly less. The black sphere slowly fell. This thing's volume had completely exceeded the area of the stairs. If it really fell, everyone here would die without a burial place. Everyone finally understood that they couldn't easily leave here. The black sphere didn't have anything special about it. It just released an invisible pressure that was enough to suppress everything. Facing the black sphere, everyone felt a sense of powerlessness in their hearts. This was the truth. This black sphere was so huge. How could they stop it? More importantly, they had no way out at this moment. Because once the black sphere fell, the entire stairway would probably collapse in an instant, so they had no way to retreat. Since that was the case, there was only one way left, and that was to fight with their lives. At this moment, there was no need for any words. The 7 of them knew very well what to do. Zhuge took the lead. He took out a 5th-level spiritual sword and pointed it in the air, outlining a mysterious starry sky map. Then he shattered his spiritual sword. The fragments turned into stars in the starry sky map, and condensed into a sword-shaped constellation. He formed a seal with his hands and the whole starry sky suddenly dimmed. All the starlight gathered on Zhuge body, making him extremely bright. And his cultivation aura continued to rise. In an instant, it surpassed the peak of the Spirit Aperture realm, and reached the level of the Spirit Gang realm. Of course, he only had the spiritual power of the Spirit Gang realm, but he didn't have the Spirit Gang. Even so, his means were terrifying enough. Wu Diao didn't see the change in Zhuge. He had already closed his eyes. If one looked carefully, they would find that he wasn't breathing. He had already focused all of his attention, and even his breathing had changed to internal breathing, for fear of being affected in the slightest. Thump, a very subtle sound was heard. It sounded a bit like a heartbeat. Strangely, the sound came from the ground under his feet. Thump. Thump. The sound of the heartbeat became louder and louder, and the ground around him rippled like the surface of a lake. It was as if the earth had a life of its own. Shi Feiying directly burned her essence blood. Her crimson ice crystal turned completely blood red, blooming with enchanting ice crystal flowers. Mu Qinglin formed a seal with one hand. The skin all over his body quickly darkened and wrinkled. At first glance, it looked very similar to the bark of an old tree, but the feeling he gave was like a towering ancient tree in a landslide, not afraid of anything. Dichuan growled and tore his clothes. Complex and strange patterns were engraved on his front and back. Those patterns lit up one after another, and an ancient and wild aura was emitted. Blood chi rose behind the Delta Origi. A ferocious skeleton appeared in the blood chi. The skeleton piously prayed to the sky, and a blood moon quietly appeared. Leng Shiqi looked at these people and thought that they were still hiding something. Those who could reach this step could not be underestimated. He was not in a hurry to make a move, because he had encountered the same problem as when he fought the ice crystal giant. The effect of divine ephemeral epiphyllum was not great, and demonic ephemeral epiphyllum was temporarily unusable. He looked at the slowly falling black sphere, and then looked at the 5 light gates that represented the power of the 5 elements. He thought to himself, the black sphere seems to be formed from the fusion of the power of the 5 elements. The 5 elements have always been in harmony with each other, and there are no flaws. Then what can break the 5 elements? When the heavens and earth were created, the 5 elements were fixed. But before the heavens and earth were created, there was only chaos in the world. What was it that created the heavens and earth? Thoughts constantly flashed through Leng Shiqi's mind. He seemed to have grasped a trace of inspiration, and his eyes became clearer and clearer. At this moment, his primordial spirit actually left his body, and he once again saw countless threads of different colors in this world. These threads were as thin as hair, but there were also a few threads that were as thick as an arm. These threads only had 2 colors, black and white. Chapter 481. At this moment, Leng Shiqi was enlightened, and an indescribable feeling filled his whole body. His primordial spirit could only leave his body for a few seconds, so he quickly retracted his primordial spirit into his spiritual sea. Then he opened his mouth and swallowed a blood spirit pill, burning his essence blood in exchange for a large amount of spiritual power. He clenched his fists, and his eyes shone with black and white light. Leng Shiqi's right fist was blooming with the ultimate power of light, purifying everything. Great Brightness Fist. His left fist was surging with demonic qi, condensing into black lotuses that eroded everything. Black Lotus Demon Fist. These 2 fist techniques were both level 6 spiritual skills. One was one of the rewards he got after destroying Extreme Fire Village, and the other was bought from the system store not long ago. Leng Shiqi used 2 level 6 spiritual skills at the same time, which was simply impossible in the eyes of others. First of all, level 6 spiritual skills were the standard for Gang Spirit Realm experts. Only the geniuses of various forces were qualified and capable of practicing level 6 spiritual skills at the spiritual aperture realm. For example, among the several people present, Delta Origi, Zhugapuha, and Wu Diao were all preparing to use level 6 spiritual skills. Therefore, people who could practice and use level 6 spiritual skills at the spiritual aperture realm were absolutely rare. Not to mention using 2 level 6 spiritual skills at the same time. Even a Gang Spirit Realm expert would find it difficult to do so. Leng Shiqi, on the other hand, had already cultivated 2 spiritual techniques to the great perfection realm with his unlimited skill points. He was able to use them with ease. In addition, he had been deriving spiritual techniques for many years, so he often used 2 or even more spiritual techniques at the same time. Therefore, there was this scene in front of them. But Leng Shiqi was not satisfied with this. What he wanted was not to use Great Brightness Fist and Black Lotus Demon Fist at the same time, but to combine the 2 level 6 spiritual skills together. The way he thought of to resist the Black Sphere was to break the 5 elements with Yin and Yang. At the beginning of the world, Yin and Yang were first divided, and then the 5 elements were determined. To break the Black Sphere condensed by the 5 elements, only the power of Yin and Yang could do so. The Great Light Fist was the authentic power of Yang, while the Black Lotus Demonic Fist was a demonic technique that corresponded to the power of Yang. Of course, these 2 spiritual techniques could not purely represent Yin and Yang, but they contain the power of Yin and Yang respectively. As long as the Great Light Fist and the Black Lotus Demonic Fist could be combined, it would be possible to defeat the Black Sphere. This was Leng Shiqi's last resort. Now he could only stake it all on one throw. Black and white light swirled above Leng Shiqi's head. In the blink of an eye, a pure white swastika and a black lotus made of devil chi appeared. Both of them exuded terrifying spiritual power. Leng Shiqi tried to get them closer, but the 2 began to repel each other as soon as they got a little closer. The spiritual energy in Lung Shiqi's body suddenly became chaotic, and he almost lost control. It was definitely not easy to fuse two completely opposite level 6 spiritual skills in a battle. In fact, it was practically impossible. If word got out, people would think that Lung Shiqi was dreaming. At the same time, the black sphere crushed down, and the terrifying spiritual pressure made everyone's faces pale. Even breathing became difficult. Zhuge Puha was still the first to make a move. His spiritual sword was already broken, but it was only a level 5 spiritual sword. At this time he took out his trump card, the Merak star painting sword. He pointed his sword, and a ray of starlight shone in all directions. In an instant, the sky changed color. The gray sky instantly turned into a sky full of stars. The countless stars in the sky were all swords. The sword rays were like a meteor shower, and for a moment, the power was amazing. However, all the starlight sword rays were annihilated before they could even get close to the black sphere. Bright red blood flowed out of the corner of Zhuge Puha's eyes. Not only was he exhausted of spiritual energy, but he was also unwilling to accept that his strongest spiritual technique could not do anything to the black sphere. Suddenly, Wu Diao's roar rang in his ears. Earth pulse. Zhuge Puha looked at Wu Diao from the corner of his eyes. At this time, Wu Diao's body was very strange. He was clearly standing there, but he gave people a feeling that he could not see clearly. It was as if he had become one with the space. With his roar, everyone could clearly hear the sound of a heart beating violently. In fact, it was not the heart beating, but the earth shaking. Plop! A thick dark yellow brilliance burst out from the ground and rushed straight to the black sphere. The strange thing was that this yellow brilliance did not seem to have any offensive power. It only had the characteristic of anti-gravity. Before this, Wu Diao had also used the anti-gravity spiritual technique once, but compared to the current one, it was simply a child in the presence of an adult. Under the effect of his anti-gravity, the yellow brilliance slowed down the black sphere's falling speed. In Zhuge Puha's starry sky, the black sphere was like a black hole that was constantly absorbing the starlight sword rays. At this time, something else suddenly appeared in the starry sky. It was a crescent blood moon. The blood moon flickered, as if it had its own breathing. Under Gu San's control, it flew to the top of the black sphere, bringing with it a boundless blood aura as it slashed down. The blood moon fell from the sky, and a terrifying bloodlust erupted, capable of breaking mountains and rivers. Di Chuan leapt high into the air like a human cannonball. The black and red sword rays were vast and mighty, layer upon layer, dazzling everyone. Mu Qinglin transformed into an ancient tree and rose from the ground. Her branches were like sharp spears, and Shi Feiying's body was surrounded by crimson snowflakes. She was bewitching and beautiful. They did not hesitate to use their strongest spiritual techniques. Working together, they really did temporarily stop the black sphere's falling momentum. However, this was not a long-term plan. If even one of them could not hold on, it would be equivalent to wasting all their previous efforts. Therefore, they all looked at Lung Shiqi at the same time. Ever since they entered the stairway to heaven, Lung Shiqi had given them too many surprises and surprises. Perhaps he still had something up his sleeve. In fact, Lung Shiqi, who was using the Great Light Fist and Black Lotus Demonic Fist at the same time, was about to collapse. The spiritual spirals in his body were spinning to the extreme. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the black sphere. At this moment, an idea flashed through his mind. He loosened his fists a little, and the swastika and the black lotus of devil chi immediately began to dissipate. However, they did not disappear. Instead, they turned into streaks of black and white light that spread out like a waterfall. Lung Shiqi's mind moved. The black and white light intertwined and rotated. Not long after, it formed a black and white vortex behind him. He had simulated the fist force of the Great Light Fist and Black Lotus Demonic Fist into the shape of a spiritual spiral. As soon as the black and white spiritual spirals formed, they caused a disturbance in heaven and earth. The entire space shook inexplicably. Both the stairway to heaven and the black sphere trembled. Lung Shiqi was secretly happy. His idea was right. Immediately, he focused all his attention on controlling the black and white spiritual spirals to spin slowly. They spun faster and faster. even stirring up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and stirring up the wind and clouds. They directly devoured all the spiritual energy within a few miles. Suddenly, a hole appeared in the center of the spiritual spirals. As they spun faster, the hole became bigger and bigger. Immediately after, a black and white ball drilled out of the hole. As soon as the black and white sphere appeared, the entire minor chaos of 5 elements suddenly shook. The 5 elements area, the stairway to heaven, the black sphere, and the spiritual techniques of the other people were constantly shaking and twisting. The star maps were destroyed, the blood moon dissipated, the ancient trees withered, and the ice crystals melted in this world. Yin and yang were reversed, and the 5 elements were reversed. Everything was in chaos. The source of all this was the black and white sphere formed by Lung Shiqi. Everyone's spiritual techniques were forcibly interrupted, and some of them even suffered from the backlash of their spiritual techniques. They all looked at Lung Shiqi in horror. This time, what amazing method did he use? However, Lung Shiqi did not know what was going on at all. All his divine thoughts were used to control the black and white sphere. Even his 5 senses were withdrawn. He knew best how terrifying the black and white sphere was. If he was distracted, even if there was a slight mistake, he would be the first to die. At this moment, there was only the black sphere in the sky in his eyes. He wanted to crush it. Chapter 482. Lung Shiqi couldn't help but roar. He used all his strength to force himself to bleed from his 7 orifices, but he didn't notice it. Buzz. The black and white sphere finally shot out of the spiritual spiral and headed straight for the black sphere. Suddenly, time and space stopped and the sky darkened. Everything seemed to be still, but the black and white sphere instantly crossed the space and collided with the black sphere. This was the tit-for-tat confrontation between the power of yin and yang and the power of the 5 elements. However, the strange thing was that after the 2 spheres collided, there was no explosion or loud noise as everyone expected. There was only a black and white light that covered the sky and the sun. The light flowed in all directions as if they were watching a silent fireworks show. Although no one knew what was going on, when the light dissipated, they all saw that the black sphere no longer existed. That was enough. Finally, they had survived another disaster. Pfft! Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin spat out blood one after another. Both of them had used secret techniques that overdrew their bodies. Now that the crisis was over, they couldn't hold on any longer. Zhuge Puha knelt on one knee, large beads of sweat dripping down. Wu Diao sat on the ground, panting desperately. Delta Origi was also weak. Her beautiful face had long become abnormally pale. Her body was also swaying, as if she could be blown away by the wind. Di Chuan's body was obviously more shriveled than before. He was using 2 long swords to support himself. As for Lung Shiqi, he was still motionless. In fact, he couldn't move even if he wanted to. He was so weak that he couldn't even move. What they didn't know was that in the entire 5 elements Chaos Grotto Heaven, the 6 areas were all in a mess. The originally separated 5 elements areas were in a mess, and when the elements collided with each other, it caused a series of explosions. Gradually, the 5 elements in this space became chaotic. The chaotic area was also collapsing. The stairway that everyone was on began to shake, and at the same time, the various restrictions that had been imposed on them all this time disappeared. It wouldn't be long before this small space completely collapsed. Feeling that the stairway was shaking slightly, everyone's expression changed. There was no time to lose. It was better to leave this place as soon as possible. However, to their despair, they didn't know when, but the 5 light doors that originally stood at the edge of the space had disappeared. Without an exit, how were they supposed to get out? They couldn't help but despair. Lung Shiqi used his last bit of mental strength to control the Gu King to fly out. The Gu King flew to his face and opened its mouth to spit out a ball of green spiritual energy. This was one of the Gu King's abilities, Devouring Soul. Devouring Spirit could not only devour the opponent's spiritual power, but it could also return a part of it. The spiritual power it spat out just now was devoured by Leng Shiqi when he was fighting with Jiwen. This was Leng Shiqi's last trump card. As the spiritual energy entered his body, Leng Shiqi felt as if the earth was being nourished by the rain after a great drought. He looked inside himself and found that the Gu King's spiritual power was equivalent to about 10% of his own spiritual power. Although it was very little, it was extremely precious in this situation. Rumble. The stones on the stairway continued to crack and fall. They were standing at the highest point. If one of the lower levels completely broke, they would fall down as well. Looking down, it was so deep that they couldn't see the bottom. If they really fell, they would be smashed to pieces. Leng Shiqi had the Gu King and the ability to fly. He wasn't afraid of falling, but what about the others? He used the ghostly spring steps and instantly came to the side of Delta Origi. He didn't care about the lives of others, as long as Delta Origi could survive. Delta Origi was already extremely weak. Under the continuous tremors, she almost fainted. Leng Shiqi gently hugged her, and then a pair of colorful wings stretched out from his back as he prepared to fly down. "Brother Lu, wait a moment!" Di Chuan suddenly shouted, causing Leng Shiqi's movements to slightly pause. Di Chuan hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, take me down with you. All the soul stones I have are yours. I can give them to you now." After saying that, he took out all the soul stones in front of him. At a rough glance, there were about 30 to 40 kilograms. Leng Shiqi raised his eyebrows slightly. With a wave of his hand, he put all the soul stones into his mustard seed bracelet. Seeing this, Di Chuan grinned. He had made a deal with Leng Shiqi before. He knew that Leng Shiqi was a person who valued profits, so he decisively decided to pay to avoid disaster. From the results, he made the right choice. As for why Leng Shiqi took away Blood Moon for free, in Di Chuan's opinion, it was nothing more than taking a fancy to Blood Moon and wanting to be the hero to save the damsel in distress. Leng Shiqi's wings flapped gently, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Di Chuan and grabbed his arm. Without the influence of gravity, Leng Shiqi wouldn't have any problems even if he carried 2 people. Immediately, he spread his wings and was about to fly away, but the others didn't want to wait for death here. Wu Diao immediately stretched out his hand and shouted, Don't go, I can also give you the soul stones. No, I can give you all my resources, take me down." Speaking of this, his face showed a pained expression. However, Leng Shiqi didn't even look at him. He had already flown away with Delta Origi and Di Chuan, leaving behind only scattered streams of light. Wu Diao stretched out his hands in the wind. Zhuge Pu and the other 3 were also a little desperate. There were more and more cracks on the ground of the stairway to heaven. It wouldn't be long before they fell down. Zhuge Pu's face was stained with blood, and the jade crown on his head had long disappeared. He no longer looked like an elegant gentleman. "I didn't expect to fall to my death here. I'd rather die in battle." Thinking of this, he felt a strong sense of unwillingness in his heart. Xi Feiying and Mu Qinglin were extremely weak and powerless. They could only lie on the ground and wait for death to come. On the other side, Leng Shiqi landed on the ground with the other 2. Although the ground was shaking violently, it didn't split open. They were safe for now. Leng Shiqi put down the 2 and immediately looked around. However, he didn't see Buyangqiu's figure. He felt a little strange. Buyangqiu should have come down a long time ago. Where did he run off to now? "Brother Di, please take care of Blood Moon. I have to go up again." Di Chuan's feet were on the ground, and he felt a lot more at ease. He hurriedly nodded and said, "Brother Lu, don't worry." Leng Shiqi immediately spread his wings and flew up. He turned into a 5-colored stream of light and rushed into the sky. At this time, large amounts of rocks were falling from the stairway to heaven. It clearly couldn't hold on for much longer. When he flew back to the top, his figure was like a savior in the eyes of Wu Diao and the other 3. Even Mu Qinglin and Xi Feiying, who were prepared to die, had a strong desire to live in their eyes. Leng Shiqi said straightforwardly, "I can only take 2 people down. Use money to buy lives. The highest bidder wins." He was actually holding an auction here, and he was auctioning lives. Zhuge Puha didn't say anything and directly threw over his mustard seed bracelet. This meant that he was willing to use all of his belongings to exchange for his own life. Lung Shiqi lightly weighed the mustard seed bracelet. Just from its appearance, this mustard seed bracelet was much more exquisite than his own. He sent his mental power into it. There were all kinds of resources inside. Just the soul stones alone were more than 60 kilograms. He nodded in satisfaction. Zhuge Puha also secretly sighed in relief. He walked to Lung Shiqi's side. At this time, Wu Diyao was holding his mustard seed bracelet. He had a conflicted expression. He loved money by nature, but in the face of life and death, he still knew what to do. He reluctantly handed over his mustard seed bracelet. Chapter 483. After Lung Shiqi took the mustard seed bag, he looked at Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin. The desire to live that had just risen in the two's heart was quickly extinguished, because they knew that they definitely couldn't compete with Wu Diyao and Zhuge Puha for resources. Therefore they all remained silent. Who would have thought that Lung Shiqi would say, "It's not impossible to bring two more." Whoosh! Mu Qinglin and Shi Feiying's gazes instantly turned, their eyes flashing with indescribable excitement. "Bring me along, I can give you anything you want." Shi Feiying's red lips let out a sweet voice, causing one's heart to surge. The corner of Lung Shiqi's mouth rose slightly. "Give all the resources to me. In addition, I'm also very interested in that special ice crystal secret technique of yours." But Shi Feiying subconsciously wanted to refuse. That was her family's secret technique that could not be passed down, and could not be leaked. But all of a sudden, a third of the ground on the top floor shattered and fell down. Shi Feiying instantly swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. She gritted her teeth and said, "Fine. Very good. Mu Qinglin, what about you?" Lung Shiqi turned to Mu Qinglin with a smile. Mu Qinglin bitterly smiled. Now that things had come to this, he had no choice. He helplessly said, "I'll listen to Brother Liu." Then, Lung Shiqi took their mustard seed bracelets and various mysterious secret techniques, waved his hand, and sent out a few rays of light that swept everyone up and flew away. At the same time, in the city lord's mansion in the outside world, Eunuch Gao and Lei Mayan were watching everything that happened in the minor chaos paradise through a secret technique. From the beginning, people began to die continuously. Anyone who could pass the first round of tests could definitely be called a rare genius in 100 years, but their expressions were completely unmoved. They were like high and mighty gods who had cut off their 7 emotions and 6 desires, coldly watching the struggles of the mortals. Just like that, they watched as everyone gradually gathered from various regions to the chaos region. There, they fought with all kinds of strange creatures and even killed each other. Just like that, they watched as the last few people climbed up the stairway to heaven. They watched as Lung Shiqi and the others fell into battle after battle. They watched as Buyangqiu gave up and Wang Zhu died. Even when the crowd reached the end, the two of them were still expressionless. However, when Lung Shiqi combined the Great Brightness Fist and the Black Lotus Demonic Fist to simulate the spiritual spiral, Eunuch Gao and Lei Mayan's jaws dropped in shock. For these two people who had been in high positions for a long time, unless something big had happened, it was impossible for them to reveal such an expression. This was because they could no longer see anything in the minor chaos paradise. However, in reality, the sky had indeed collapsed. It was the minor 5 elements chaos paradise that had collapsed. Kacha, kacha. A few cracks suddenly appeared on the bracelet that maintained the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. Lei Mayan immediately let out a groan as blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. The minor 5 elements chaos paradise was an imitation of the continent's most mysterious 5 elements chaos paradise. Even if it was an imitation, it was enough to become the most important treasure of the Thunderblaze dynasty. In this small secret realm, one could be more in tune with the heaven and earth. It would also be easier to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth. Normally, only those spirit cultivators who had made great contributions to the unity of heaven and man realm were qualified to enter and cultivate. And those monsters in the secret realm were nothing to experts of the unity of heaven and man realm. They could completely ignore them. This time, Lei Mayan came to host the elite meeting with a very special mission. This mission was related to the stability of the Thunderblaze dynasty in a few years. The current emperor should not be able to hold on for more than a few years. The various princes had already begun to fight openly and secretly. No matter if it was the Discipline Commission or the Dark Thunder Guards, many people had secretly sought refuge with their masters. Even the 4 great punishment envoys and the 4 great general managers had people standing on their side. But in the end, no matter who ascended the throne, they would definitely carry out a large-scale purge of the people from the other factions. At that time, the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards would lose a large number of experts and talents. The change of imperial power would definitely attract the attention of the various large spirit cultivator sections. It would also attract the attention of the other 2 great dynasties. In order for the new emperor to be able to sit steadily on the throne, the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards could not be lost. Thus, this year's elite meeting was also used to select the geniuses who could become the 4 great general managers, or the 4 great punishment envoys. Thus, she had the authority to bring out the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise as a testing ground. Right now, although the Lung Shiqi and the others were only at the Spirit Aperture realm, when they came out, they would have the opportunity to enter the Thunderblaze dynasty's dragon vein to cultivate. Their cultivation would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. In a few more years, they would have the chance to break through to the unity of heaven and man realm. But she never would have thought that the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise would suddenly collapse. Although she and Eunuch Gao could see the scene in the secret realm, they could not hear the sound, nor could they feel the aura inside. Thus, they did not know what the people inside had done to cause such a thing to happen. They only saw Lung Shiqi condensing the black and white spiritual spirals, and it seemed that something was about to come out of them. But after that, it was just a blur. After that, the black sphere was defeated and turned into a ray of light. It was also at this moment that the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise began to collapse. Lei Mayan had used her own strength to open the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise. Now that the secret realm had collapsed, she naturally suffered a backlash and suffered some internal injuries. However, she did not care about her injuries. She only wanted to know why the secret realm had collapsed. This secret realm could be considered a treasure that the Thunderblaze dynasty valued greatly, but it had been indirectly destroyed in her hands. Even if she held a high position, she could not escape the blame. But even though she was experienced and knowledgeable, she could not figure out the reason. Eunuch Gao's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Princess, let's release those people first. If they all die inside, we won't be able to account for it." Only then did Lei Mayan come back to her senses. She also shuddered. If the few people inside died, causing the elite assembly to become a joke, then she would have seriously neglected her duty. In addition to the crime of losing the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise, she might not be able to keep her position as the punishment envoy. Lei Mayan's face was gloomy. Taking advantage of the fact that the secret realm had not completely collapsed, she sent dozens of seals into the secret realm. At the same time, after Lung Shiqi brought the few people to the ground, he was also thinking about how to get out with a frown. Seeing that the heavens were collapsing and the earth was cracking, they were all arrows at the end of their flight, with less than 10% of their combat strength left. More importantly, they did not even know where to run. At this moment, 7 streams of light suddenly appeared in the air, enveloping them. Before the few of them could react, their figures had already disappeared. After Lei Mayan brought the few people out, she immediately withdrew the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise. The secret realm returned to its original appearance, looking like a very ordinary bracelet. However, this bracelet was now covered with cracks, as if it would completely shatter with just a light shake. Lei Mayan put away the bracelet with heartache. In her heart, she still had some expectations of repairing the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise. After the few people appeared out of thin air in the City Lord's mansion, they quickly knew that they were saved. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The feeling of escaping death several times was something that ordinary people could not understand. Chapter 484. Lung Shiqi's gaze swept around, but he still didn't see Bu Yangqiu. Since Lei Mian had taken action to bring them out, there was no reason for anyone to be left behind. From the looks of it, Bu Yangqiu had really died by accident. Eunuch Gao looked at the heavily injured and weak 7 people and said, "Go back and recuperate. Come back here in 3 days." Logically speaking, it should be announced that the 5 people passed the test, but they didn't dare to disobey Eunuch Gao's orders and left. Before leaving, Lung Shiqi gave Delta Orgi a look, indicating that she should rest well. After returning to his room, he immediately released dozens of goo worms as a warning, and checked the situation in his body. Many of his meridians and spirit veins were damaged. This was caused by him forcefully overdrafting his spirit energy. At the same time, there were many medicinal dregs left in his meridians. These were left behind by him swallowing all kinds of pills without any hesitation. If he couldn't get rid of these dregs in time, it would leave behind hidden dangers in his cultivation, and cause his cultivation speed to slow down. Apart from this, the most serious thing was the loss of essence blood. Lung Shiqi had maintained the blood mark of serenity for a long time, and even swallowed a blood spirit pill. The essence blood in his body was almost burnt out. His spirit energy and mental strength could be recovered in a short time, but his essence blood would take a long time to recover. This meant that his battle strength would decrease for a period of time. Fortunately, he didn't suffer any serious injuries. Compared to the others, he was still in a good condition. After checking his condition, he took out 4 mustard seed bracelets and placed them in front of him. These were naturally the mustard seed bracelets of Zhugepu and the other 4. If one were to talk about what Lung Shiqi gained from the minor 5 elements chaos paradise, it would be condensing a primordial spirit and the resources in front of him. Actually, when he first brought Delta Orgi down, he could have taken everyone with him. The reason why he didn't pay attention to Wu Diao and the others was to make them feel despair. Only then would they hand over all their resources without hesitation. The 4 of them were all Spirit Aperture Realm geniuses who were either inspectors or commissioners. The wealth they possessed was definitely beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Walala! Lung Shiqi poured out all the items in the 4 bracelets, occupying more than half of the room. Seeing so many resources, even he himself was a little surprised. However, on second thought, those people had also destroyed second-rate sects before. They must have plundered a lot of resources from those sects, so he was relieved. Then he sorted all the resources into categories: spirit tools, pills, materials, rare treasures. It could be said that he had struck gold. First, he sold all the items that he had no use for to the system. His profit was considerable, and he now had more than 5,600 system coins on him. And Lung Shiqi cared about 3 things the most. 2 of them were cultivation methods and spiritual techniques, namely the Limitless Deadwood Incantation and the Crimson Ice Crystal Technique. This was what Mu Qinglin and Shi Feiying had handed over. The Limitless Deadwood Incantation allowed him to transform into a dead tree with both offensive and defensive capabilities. Not only did it have powerful defensive capabilities, but it could also transform into a giant tree to attack. The Crimson Ice Crystal Technique was a very rare ice cultivation method. Its rank was not low, but to cultivate this cultivation method, one had to use their own blood as nourishment to refine the ice crystal. It turned out that the crimson color was actually condensed from fresh blood. Lung Shiqi was very satisfied with these cultivation methods and spiritual techniques. Apart from these, what he was most satisfied with were the soul stones. Of the 7 people who had survived to the end in the minor chaos paradise, apart from Delta Origi, all the soul stones of the others were with him. Counting them carefully, he actually had as many as 300 caddies of soul stones. If he could refine 300 caddies of soul stones, how much would his spiritual power increase? Lung Shiqi felt a little excited just thinking about it. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that Delta Origi had secretly given him a jade slip. After that, they had gone through endless battles and had no time to look at the contents. He took out the jade slip and moved his spiritual power. A wave of information was reflected in his mind, which made him secretly shocked. It turned out that these soul stones really did have souls. In fact, the source of power of the monsters that appeared in the minor chaos paradise was the soul stones. And the soul stones were refined using a secret method to imprison the soul of a spirit cultivator. Spiritual power originally came from the soul. No wonder refining soul stones can increase spiritual power. Lung Shiqi looked at the pile of large and small soul stones in front of him. There were at least a few hundred of them. How many spirit cultivators' souls had been refined? Even though Lung Shiqi's hands were stained with blood, he still shuddered when he knew about this. Refining the soul meant that even the chance of reincarnation was cut off. And Delta Origi's jade slip also came with a chant. Using this chant to refine the soul stones, not only could it increase one's spiritual power, it could also be converted into spiritual power. It turned out that after Delta Origi absorbed those ghost shadows, they did not drop any soul stones. They were directly refined by her, and because of this, she was able to continuously increase her cultivation. From this, it could be seen that this chant was not an ordinary item. He did not know where Delta Origi obtained it from. However, Lung Shiqi's gaze became fervent. If he used this chant to refine the soul stones, his cultivation could also increase rapidly. However, he did not intend to overly rely on refining the soul stones to increase his cultivation. In the end, it was still an external object. The spiritual power obtained from external objects was not pure. Just like how Delta Origi's cultivation fell due to unstable cultivation at the end, Lung Shiqi experienced a similar thing when he broke through to the spirit aperture realm in the Gu God sect. He used a few months to consolidate his cultivation and laid a good foundation. Thus, after thinking for a while, he divided the 300 gene soul stones into 4 parts. He left 100 gene for himself to refine, and 100 gene for Jiuli. He planned to give the 50 gene to Delta Origi. It was not that he was unwilling to give more, but that Delta Origi had already refined many soul stones and knew that it was a double-edged sword. Even if he gave more, Delta Origi might not accept it. As for the last 50 gene, he still had a great use for it. After organizing all the resources, Lung Shiqi began to recover his spiritual power and mental power. After about 4 hours, he opened his eyes with a strange expression. After his spiritual power recovered, he was surprised to find that his spiritual power had increased by a lot. It had already reached the 5th layer of the spirit aperture realm. This is strange. Lung Shiqi muttered. The wood area of the minor 5 elements chaos paradise and the last part of the heaven stairway had caused him to lose a part of his spiritual power. Logically speaking, the upper limit of his spiritual power should have decreased, but why did it suddenly increase by so much? He felt that the minor 5 elements chaos paradise was too mysterious. But then again, this was of course a good thing. Next, he just needed to stabilize a bit more, and he would be able to break through to the 6th layer of the spirit aperture realm. Then he habitually divided his consciousness into 2. One part was used to cultivate, and the other part continued to deduce spiritual techniques in his spiritual sea. Now he had the Limitless Deadwood spell and the Crimson Ice Crystal spell, including the Nirvana Remnant Wind Scroll. He needed to comprehend and deduce them. Most importantly, he wanted to recreate the move he used to defeat the Black Sphere in the minor 5 elements chaos paradise. It was fine if others did not know, but Lung Shiqi knew that the collapse of the minor 5 elements chaos paradise was most likely related to him. And the cause of all this was the ultimate move that combined the Great Radiance Fist and the Black Lotus Demon Fist. Chapter 485. In the Sea of Consciousness, Lung Shiqi's primordial spirit floated in mid-air. The black and white streamers around him rotated slowly, faintly forming a huge spiritual spiral. He was recreating the move of fusing the power of yin and yang. He wanted to completely master it. But something unexpected happened. Just as the black and white spiritual spiral was about to form, the fist force of the Great Light Fist and the Black Lotus Demon Fist suddenly repelled each other violently, causing the black and white spiritual spiral to collapse instantly. Lung Shiqi was stunned. He had also thought that he would fail. Back then, when he accidentally used alluring flowers for the first time. It took him a long time to fully comprehend it. However, he had never thought that he would fail so quickly. Leng Shiqi quickly composed himself and continued to try. However, what awaited him was failure after failure, endless failure. And all of them failed at the moment when the black and white spiritual spiral was about to form. What went wrong? Leng Shiqi pondered for a long time, but he still had no clue. So he began to recall what happened before he used this move. That's right, my primordial spirit went out of my body. It was also at that time that I saw the black and white threads between heaven and earth that I successfully fused the 2 6th-level spiritual techniques. Thinking of this, Leng Shiqi's consciousness returned to his body. He slapped his forehead, and his primordial spirit came out of the top of his head. In the vision of his primordial spirit, there were some changes in heaven and earth. Everywhere his primordial spirit saw faint light spots of various colors, but there was not a single thread. It's completely different from what I saw in the minor 5 elements Chaos Grotto heaven. What's going on? Leng Shiqi was puzzled, but he immediately thought of a possibility. That's right, the minor 5 elements Chaos Grotto heaven is a special little arcane realm. Maybe it's different from the outside world. Could it be that I can't fuse the Great Light Fist and the Black Lotus Demon Fist in the outside world? Leng Shiqi suddenly felt that he had suffered a great loss. If that was the case, it meant that he had lost an extremely powerful spiritual technique. A spiritual technique that was completely superior to a short-lived one. Of course, Leng Shiqi did not give up. He withdrew his primordial spirit and returned to his spiritual sea to try to fuse the 2 techniques in another way. He spent the entire day in cultivation. The next day, Leng Shiqi stopped practicing. The reason he stopped was because there was a series of knocks on the door. Leng Shiqi whispered, "Finally, someone can't wait any longer. I wonder who will be the first to come." He opened the door and saw Di Chuan standing there. Even without Di Chuan saying anything, Leng Shiqi knew what he was here for. He was definitely here for the Soul Stone. Before entering the minor 5 elements Chaos Paradise, Lei Mayan had said that only the top 5 with the most tokens or soul stones would be able to pass the second round of the test. But now that 7 people had appeared, it meant that 2 of them would be eliminated. More importantly, other than the Leng Shiqi and the Delta Origi, the other 5 did not even have a single soul stone. In order to survive, they even gave their tokens and mustard seed bracelets to Leng Shiqi. So among the 7 people, the Leng Shiqi and the Delta Origi could pass the test by default. As for the remaining 3 spots, it was up to Leng Shiqi to decide. Whoever he gave the soul stone to could pass the test. No one would have expected that the final decision would be in the hands of Leng Shiqi. After Di Chuan came out, he only took a day to recuperate. He had not fully recovered yet, but he could not wait to find him. Even if he obtained a soul stone from Leng Shiqi, it would be enough for him to advance. So he had a fervent smile on his face, which gave Leng Shiqi goosebumps. "Brother Di, please come in." After sitting down, Di Chuan smiled and said, "Brother Lu should know my purpose." Leng Shiqi glanced at him and did not answer. He really wanted to know what Di Chuan could take out to exchange for soul stones when he used up all his resources during the crystal formation pill transaction. Di Chuan could be considered to have a better understanding of Leng Shiqi's character. Without another word, he took out a jade slip and said, "Brother Lu, I see that you've also cultivated a demonic art, and you're also a swordsman. May I know how many soul stones my rank 5 spiritual skill, Crimson Demon Shadow Swords, can be exchanged for?" Crimson Demon Double Shadow Sword was the sword technique that Di Chuan often used. It was a rare dual sword style, and was very useful whether it was one-on-one or in group battles. Leng Shiqi pondered for a moment and said, 1 kilogram of soul stones. 1 kilogram. Di Chuan was stunned. A level 5 spiritual technique, and one of the best among level 5 spiritual techniques, could only be exchanged for 1 kilogram of soul stones? If Leng Shiqi had not saved him before, he would have flipped out on the spot. Leng Shiqi also saw Di Chuan's displeasure and said, "Brother Di, the others don't even have a single soul stone on them. Even if you only have a small soul stone, you can win against everyone, let alone 1 kilogram." Di Chuan understood that, But what he was most worried about now was that he wasn't the only one who had thought of coming to Lung Shiqi to trade with him for soul stones. If someone later obtained more soul stones than him at a higher price, then wouldn't he be drawing water with a bamboo basket? And according to his understanding of Lung Shiqi could definitely do something like this, so 1 kilogram of soul stones could not guarantee that he would pass the test. However, other than the Crimson Demon Double Shadow Sword, he only had the level 6 spiritual sword, and his secret technique that he could take out. The value of a level 6 spiritual sword was self-evident. It was also a weapon that he used well, and could not easily give it away. As for the secret technique, it was a top secret of the tribe where he was born and could not be leaked. Moreover, even if he gave it to Lung Shiqi, without a specific method, it would be impossible to cultivate it successfully. Lung Shiqi might not agree. Di Chuan sat on the chair with a hesitant expression. Of course, all of this was seen by Lung Shiqi. He did not say much and just waited quietly. After a while, Di Chuan made up his mind and took out 2 items from his mustard seed bracelet. They were a sword and a piece of linen. This is a level 6 spiritual sword, the Blood Shadow Sword. It can also be divided into 2. Together with the Crimson Demon Double Shadow Sword, its power is endless. In addition, there is a high-level secret technique. In terms of power, it is not inferior to a level 6 spiritual skill. Brother Liu, name a price. After Di Chuan finished speaking, his eyes stared straight at Lung Shiqi. This time, he took out all of his belongings. The reason he made this choice was because he thought that after passing the test, he would get more. Lung Shiqi was actually a little surprised. Di Chuan's determination was indeed a little beyond his expectations. Whoosh! Lung Shiqi pulled out half of the Blood Shadow Sword. He immediately felt 2 different forces rushing towards him. One was like boiling blood, and the other was pure demonic qi. It was indeed a good sword. Then he picked up the linen. The words "Desolate Seal" were written in a strange font. Chapter 486. Lung Shiqi scanned the contents of the linen cloth. This seal of desolation was indeed a high-level secret technique. Its effect was similar to the beast origin battle tattoos that he had cultivated a long time ago. They were both amplification-type secret techniques. The difference was that the seal of desolation wasn't difficult to learn, but if he wanted to continue cultivating it, he had to be baptized by the tribe. Not to mention which tribe Di Chuan was from. Where was it located? Even if Di Chuan brought Lung Shiqi to the tribe, the people in the tribe wouldn't baptize Lung Shiqi. This meant that this seemingly profound secret technique couldn't be cultivated at all. Lung Shiqi's face darkened slightly. Di Chuan, who had been observing the situation, felt his heart skip a beat. Lung Shiqi put down the linen cloth and said, "I can give you 5 kilograms of soul stones for this sword. As for the seal of desolation." When he spoke up to hear, he stopped speaking abruptly. Di Chuan sighed in his heart and said, "Fine, the desolation seal really doesn't have much value to outsiders. I'm willing to give you 8 kilograms of soul stones for the seal of desolation." Before Di Chuan could finish his words, he was forcefully interrupted by Lung Shiqi. Di Chuan abruptly raised his head, his face not concealing his surprise. A secret technique that was useless to outsiders was worth more than a level 6 spirit sword? Was Lung Shiqi confused? Lung Shiqi said sincerely, "Brother Di, we didn't get to know each other until we fought. We've been through a few life and death situations. How could I not have any feelings for Brother Di? The seal of desolation can be exchanged for 8 kilograms of soul stones. Consider it a friendship." Are you serious? Even though Lung Shiqi's words were extravagant, Di Chuan was not a greenhorn. Naturally, he still had doubts in his heart. Lung Shiqi immediately said, "Of course, but I have a small condition. When we leave, I hope Brother Di can take me to the place where I got the finger bone." "Haha, it's a piece of cake. No problem." Hearing Lung Shiqi's conditions, Di Chuan was even more convinced. He waved his hand, indicating that he could agree to Lung Shiqi's conditions. Lung Shiqi smiled as he took out 4 kilograms of soul stones and placed them in front of Di Chuan. He made a pleased gesture. Di Chuan looked at the small pile of soul stones in front of him, and couldn't help but feel a little excited. With 14 kilograms of soul stones, he had the confidence to compete with the others. As long as he passed the final test of the elite club and entered the dragon vein for cultivation, he was not only confident to break through to the gang spirit realm, but also had a smooth road of promotion in the future. He suddenly cupped his fists and said, "Brother Liu, I recognize you as my brother. I will remember this favor." Lung Shiqi was just about to say a few polite words when a voice came from outside. "May I ask if Brother Liu is in his room?" This was Zhuge Puha's voice. Zhuge Puha had also come, and his purpose was self-evident. He was definitely here for the soul stone like Di Chuan. Di Chuan waved his hand and quickly put away the soul stone. Zhuge Puha was his biggest competitor, and he couldn't expose his soul stone. "Since there are guests, I'll leave first." Di Chuan knew that he should leave, so he got up. Lung Shiqi came to the door with him, but when he opened the door he was surprised to find that not only Zhuge Puha, but also Wu Deyao, Shi Feiying and Mu Qinglin had come. The four of them had actually come together. When the door was opened, Zhuge Puha and the other three turned their eyes to Di Chuan. They naturally knew why Di Chuan came, and at this time, they were secretly guessing how many soul stones he had taken from Lung Shiqi. Di Chuan nodded casually as a greeting, and then left directly. Lung Shiqi led the four into the room. He also understood that the four of them came together because they were afraid that he would ask for an exorbitant price. It was better for everyone to sit here and have a fair bidding. "I understand why you all are here, and you all know what I want. How about this? I won't sell soul stones, but directly sell the slots. To be honest, there are only 2 slots left out of the final 5. Same old rules, the highest bidder wins. Now let's start the bidding for the first slot, and the starting price is a rank 6 resource." Lung Shiqi's short 2 sentences revealed a lot of information. For example, he, Delta Origi and Di Chuan had already locked down 3 slots, and at the same time, it somewhat disrupted the four's original plan. They originally wanted to buy soul stones, and then get the slots according to the number of soul stones, but Lung Shiqi was auctioning the slots, and the starting price was a rank 6 resource. The four's faces were as black as the bottom of a pot. They were cursing Lung Shiqi in their hearts for being insatiable, but there was nothing they could do, especially when Mu Qinglin and Shi Feiying were in the same predicament in the hidden realm, and that was that they couldn't compete with the other 2 in terms of resources. The richest of the 4 was Zhuge Puha. He took the lead and said, "Rank 6 technique, Purple Lightning Thunder Sound Record." From the name, one could tell it was a thunder technique. This was the reward he chose after completing the first round of the mission. Although he didn't practice thunder techniques, he could take it out to exchange. For example, right now it was very useful. Techniques were the most precious of all resources, and this Purple Lightning Thunder Sound Record was much more valuable than a rank 6 spiritual weapon. But Wu Deyao cursed in his heart. Zhuge Puha's words were equivalent to admitting Lung Shiqi's words, and now they didn't even have a chance to bargain. But he didn't show any weakness. This time he didn't care about the pain and quickly said, "I have a rank 6 spiritual skill, Continuous Blue Wave Spear." Zhuge Puha sneered and said, "A rank 6 spiritual skill is still a bit weaker than a rank 6 technique. Plus, my technique is a rare thunder technique, and its value is much higher than the Continuous Blue Wave Spear. Brother Liu should know what to choose, right?" Lung Shiqi nodded silently but didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Mu Qinglin and Shi Feiying. He wanted to see what else they could take out. Shi Feiying's beautiful eyes turned and said, "I'll give up on the first spot for now." "Me too," Mu Qinglin said. Their answers were within Lung Shiqi's expectations. There were 2 spots, and the strongest competition for the first spot was definitely between Wu Deyao and Zhuge Puha. If one of the 2 got the spot, the other's resources would be exposed, and then it would be time for Mu Qinglin and Shi Feiying to show their strength. Just as Brother Zhuge said, techniques are more precious than spiritual skills. If Brother Wu doesn't have any other bargaining chips, then the first spot. Lung Shiqi deliberately paused here. Sure enough, Wu Deyao immediately said, "Wait." Then his face showed a bit of struggle. Finally he clenched his teeth and said, I can give you Earth Pulse. Earth Pulse. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but be surprised. At the end of the Minor Five Elements Chaos Paradise, everyone saw Wu Diao use Earth Pulse to forcibly slow down the speed of the Black Sphere's descent. That strange anti-gravity left a deep impression on everyone. This was clearly Wu Diao's trump card. Who would have thought that he would be willing to trade it? Leng Shiqi didn't hide his expression. He was overjoyed and seemed to be about to agree to Wu Diao. In fact, he was also putting pressure on Zhuge Puha. Zhuge Puha obviously didn't expect Wu Diao to go all out. He also had high-level secret techniques, but he didn't dare to hand them over. He could only stay silent with a gloomy face. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.